Good morning, good morning, good morning. Welcome to the afternoon session of day 18. Emily, why did you say good morning? Welcome to the afternoon. Well, as I am recording this, it is Tuesday, June 4th, but we are covering court from the afternoon of Tuesday, May 28th. Tuesday, May 28th was day 18 of trial. It was the afternoon session, and I was not able to cover it that day. The only thing that had happened the morning of day 18 was the end of Brian Higgins' testimony and then the testimony of John O'Keefe's niece and nephew, which was sealed. Those in the courtroom could report on it and watch it, but it was not streamed. Their names were kept redacted. They are both under the age of 18. And that testimony, largely from reports, was that towards the end, Karen and John had been fighting. They had been yelling at each other quite a lot. At one point, John O'Keefe had told Karen Reed to leave his home, and she refused to do so. And that the morning that John O'Keefe did not come home, January 29th, that Karen Reed was frantic in a way the niece had never seen her before, that she was saying, could I have hit him? Could he have been hit by a snowplow? We had a fight last night, all the rest of it. So that's what's going on today. We are coming in on the witnesses after the niece and nephew to make sure, one, for completeness, we have all of that testimony here, and two, just to make sure that when we get to the end of this case, we haven't missed any testimony. Will I be zooming some of the background training and experience? Yes. Is this getting into medical testimony? Yes. Is that okay? Also, yes. Let me know where you're coming in from, what you're drinking. I'm going to go ahead and roll the intro. I'm going to answer questions at the end, and I'm going to try to leave a lot of time to do so because I think we'll be able to get through this testimony pretty quickly. It's not too much in court, and there's a lot we can zoom through. So, law nerds, happy Tuesday. Good to see you. Happy to be back in court with you today, even if some of you have already watched this. And is it going to be the most riveting testimony of this trial? Probably not, but those foundational pieces can be really important. So let's go.
Hey there, I'm Emily D. Baker, the internet's go-to legal analyst, breaking down the legal side of the pop culture and entertainment stories we can't stop talking about. I'm a big fan of the cursey words. I've been a licensed attorney for over 17 years, but this is not legal advice. This is where the law nerds unite to talk about facts, not... Let's get into it.
Law nerds, I completely forgot to put in my earrings this morning. It's just been that kind of a morning. Look, I am still quite tired from traveling, and this month it's not going to get much better. Why? Because I have a lot coming up this month, including some Dave Matthews Band, because as one does, and VidCon. So it's going to get real crazy. I thought this trial would be done before that. Oh, sweet summer child. What were you thinking? That this case was actually going to run on time? Oh, girl. You were wrong. So for all of you that are like, I'm finally catching a live, good morning. We are live together. The testimony is from last week, but that's okay because we need to go. So let us, I'm keeping questions till the end, but Tamagene, I'm keeping that until we get to questions. All right, let's get rolling. The jury is coming in from after lunch. The niece and nephew have testified, and we're getting into the first witness after lunch, which will be witness number 46. You know what, you guys? You know what I can do? I can just add a page in the right place.
All right, so your next witness,
on the
Mr.
notebook.
Mallory.
Yes, Your Honor. The Commonwealth called Dr. Gary Fowler to the stand.
All right. This is the ER physician. So we're going to get some medical testimony. I'm going to zoom this in a minute after I giggle with delight that because I'm using an e-ink notebook, I can just go add pages from this day. I am delighted. I was talking to Rob from Law and Lumber, who uses one of these. Alita uses one as well. And Alita's like, oh no, I've used this since like Depp v. Heard. And I'm like, I should have listened because the chat has been telling me to do that since before then. And I should have listened. And I was like, oh no, I love my notebooks. Well, I love this more at this point. All right.
Whenever you're ready, Mr. Lally.
Thank you, Your Honor.
He's like, not
afternoon,
today,
sir.
Judge.
Good afternoon.
Could you please state your name and spell your last name for the record?
Gary Fowler, F as in Frank, A-L-L-E-R.
And sir, that microphone in front of you, you can move that any way you wish. So if you want to bring it up or down, just the wand itself.
Okay.
And what do you do for work, sir?
I'm a pathologist.
And where?
Hello,
is it that you work?
sir.
I work at Good Samaritan Medical Center.
And how long have you been working as a pathologist at Good Samaritan?
Since November of...
This should be, let's see. This should be the ER doc, not the pathologist, which means I probably queued this up to after a sidebar and I'm missing the witness. Hold on, you guys. False start. Just kidding. We're gonna do that one more time because let's see. Where is the rest of the ER doc? I was like, wait a second, pathology. That's not the right witness. Oh, right.
Probably one, either nurse practitioner, two doc.
This is so hard. I remember this happening
there's
this day because they came back in the middle of this witness. So this is going to be John Rice, the emergency medical physician, but the stream came back in after the first few questions, but they are Lally's questions. So they're going to be like, where did you go to med school? And like, you know, how did you always kind of sort of dream of being a doctor? You know, what was your favorite thing to do as a kid? So we're going to try to make sure that we are right where that is starting. Sorry, y'all. That was me. I was like, oh, that must have been the lunch break because I saw only the
There
fan.
is South Shore.
And no, I was wrong. Normally I'm pretty prepared, but that was me.
My current employer is South Shore Health.
There we go.
And how long have you been working for South Shore Health?
I started there
Sorry, chat.
in October of this past year, 2023.
And where did you work prior to that?
Before that, I had been at full-time
We're going to
at Good
1.25
Samaritan Hospital in Brockton.
And how long was it that you
during
worked
the
at Good
background
Samaritan?
training. When we get to the treatment of the
Let's
victim,
see,
I will slow
I
it
started
down.
at Good Samaritan in 2010.
Now, sir, if I could, I'd like to just talk a little bit about your educational background. Where did you go to school as far as your undergrad was concerned?
I went to undergraduate at the College of William and Mary in Williamsburg, Virginia.
And what, if any, degrees did you graduate from there?
I obtained a bachelor's
any
of science in chemistry.
What if any degrees? No, sir. I have no degrees. I just play a doctor on TV.
And following your graduation from there, where did you go to school after that?
So after that, I attended University of Virginia for medical school. Is that what you asked me? I'm sorry.
And following your graduation,
What did you
from
ask
medical
me?
school, where did
Yes.
you go
It's
after
not you,
Then I did
sir.
a emergency medicine residency in
As one does.
Philadelphia at University of Pennsylvania.
And what is a residency, sir?
Oh, Jesus
So residency
Christ.
is several years of training that's where doctors will specialize. For me in emergency medicine, some people choose to be surgeons, pediatricians. That's when more of the specialization, if you will, happens
At this
in
point, I
medicine,
think a lot of
medical
us
training.
have watched
How long
ER.
was your residency?
It was 4 years.
And following your residency, where did you go from there?
Chelsea,
So
I know
I,
some people go to college and receive no degree, but generally you can't get into med school and or law school without the undergrad degree. So the what, if any, degree did you receive doesn't make sense in this context. In some context, it might. In this context, it makes no sense. Like none at all. Sir, do you prefer Jimmy John's to Subway? I've got
2008,
questions.
finished residency. I worked for 2 years in Manassas, Virginia at Prince William Hospital for 2 years.
And are you board certified?
I am by American
Board
Board of
certified
Emergency Medicine. Yes.
In emergency medicine.
And what is it that you're board certified in?
Specifically emergency medicine.
And when you use that term as far as
I'm
board
gonna answer
certification
this
is
in a little
concerned,
bit.
What goes into that? What does that entail?
So when I obtained board certification, it was a 2-step process where there was a written exam administered at one of the testing centers. And after you pass that, then there's an in-person
Hey, Dr. B,
oral exam,
Thank
I guess
you.
is what they're called.
this doctor is trying to
And that's
explain
where you're
how
given
you
like
become
didactic
an
or
ER
individual
medical
cases. Assuming you pass that, then you're board certified.
and how you become
Your
board
board
certified. Oh, we
certification
just
is
went
updated
over
currently?
residency.
Yes.
We are now to board certification.
Now, With reference to the time that you worked at Good Samaritan, as far as the emergency department is concerned, can you describe to the jury sort of what does the emergency department at Good Samaritan look like as far as staff, bedding, sort of layout? Like, can you describe that to the jury?
Sure. So at the time and currently, there's 36 treatment rooms in the main ER. A lot of hallway stretchers as well.
That's a lot of treatment rooms. 30 treatment rooms.
There's also
is a
an
big
express
ER.
care kind of area, but for the
It is a
purposes of this
big ER.
conversation, 36 beds in the main ER. Staffing wise, there'd be
36 beds
anywhere
in the main
between
ER. That's a big ER.
4 to 5 and 12 nurses. And for the purposes of this discussion, it would have been 2 docs on and probably 1 either nurse practitioner or physician assistant.
I appreciate that he's like
in the
to try
morning.
to speed us along here.
And as far as the morning, what I'm going to turn your attention to is the morning of January 29th, 2022. Were you working at the Good Samaritan on that day?
If that's the morning of this incident, then yes.
And is there a particular shift or what kind
For
of
argument's
hours
sake,
did you be
yes.
working around that time at Good Samaritan?
I'm pretty sure I started my shift at 6 a.m. that day. There was a 6 a.m. to 2 p.m. It was either 2 or 3 to, excuse me. It was either 6 to 2 or 6 to 3 p.m., but the shift would have started at 6 a.m. as I recall.
Ugh.
And
For all of you that do
on that
shift
day at
work,
Good
God
Samaritan,
bless
do
you, but
recall,
I
becoming involved
very
with
be
the
bad.
treatment of a patient by the name of John O'Keefe.
Yes.
And Your Honor, may I approach the witness?
Yes.
I'm going to slow this down. I appreciate that Lally has, well, had him at 1.25, but has moved somewhat quickly into actually what we're here for. For those of you asking what Dr. B is a doctor of, I'm not going to make jokes. I'm not. He's a maxillofacial prosthodontist. So he's a dental specialist.
I'm showing you a document. If you could just take a look at that.
That's not me, that feed.
You want me to look through each page or just acknowledge that?
Just as far as, do you recognize what that?
Okay.
You recognize that?
Is a transcription
I might switch feeds in a
or a
moment.
copy of
Mm-hmm.
dictated,
It's his report.
and on the front page is also a
Okay.
called like a code sheet, which
Is how you run the code.
I've signed off on, detailing what resuscitative efforts, as in the specific that were performed on Mr. O'Keefe's behalf.
That's it. That's all. This feed, we're gonna give a different feed a try. Just for the love of Tuesday. I cannot. But you know what? We're in live court, but it's not like live, so we don't have to put up with the nonsense. I'll go back to the bird feeder cam. Like honestly, today. We'll just run the audio of trial and the bird feeder, and we'll go from there. It's a lot. All right. But at least him looking through his notes is a pretty easy point to find. Let me gain the audio real quick and make sure we're in the right spot. And then we'll just go to Court TV's feed and go from there. So hopefully that will eliminate the frustration.
If you can't remember things and you need to reference the chart, you can do that, Doctor.
Oh, that audio's mono.
So it looks like, based on the code sheet,
If this does not refresh from mono, we'll switch back in a minute. But, oh gosh.
at University of Pennsylvania.
All right, we've done that. We're going to go through his sheets that he was given.
What that document is?
Yes, of course.
But this
And
is
what do you recognize that?
mono at the moment.
So it looks like is a
Miguelino, will you go ahead
transcription,
in this Court TV feed
or a
and see if
copy
it
of
switches back from
the
mono?
medical chart that I would have produced or dictated. And on the front page is also a, it's called like a code sheet, which the nurses would have put together and I would have signed off on, detailing what resuscitative efforts,
This
as
is
in the
left ear
specific
only
details and
mono
timing of
from
the
court.
resuscitative efforts that were performed on Mr. O'Keefe's behalf.
Thanks. Your Honor, with the court's permission, may the witness hold on to that during the course of his testimony?
Yes.
And Your Honor, what I would seek to introduce in a minute, the next exhibit would be a redacted copy of those same records.
Okay. Is there any objection?
Your Honor, if we could just review those.
The defense should have already reviewed this in advance. This is not new, but the defense might not have reviewed the redactions. So the defense is reviewing the exhibit as it will be put in. The defense is approaching. They probably want something additionally redacted or not redacted, as it were. What happened at the ER is not in great controversy, and for an ER physician to need to refer back to their notes is why they take notes, because of how much work they do, right?
Okay, thank you. And Mr. Lally, I'll let you hold on to what's been marked SS for identification.
R. Hampy, thanks for your work. So far, this guy sounds just like a doctor got called in to testify. They often don't testify. They don't always want to testify.
Doctor.
In all of the cases involving death that I tried, we only called in docs a very few times because something of import had happened at the hospital. Normally, you just go with the coroner.
All right, so with regard to Mr. O'Keefe, about what time did he come into your facility at Good Samaritan?
Would you like me to look at the chart here? Let's see.
Sure. If you can't remember things and you need to reference the chart, you can do that,
Oh,
Doctor.
Corey, that's
Okay,
really
thanks.
helpful. Thank you.
So it looks like, based on the code sheet,
I tried to
first
fix
line
that on
starting
my
at 0647, so I'll say 6:47 a.m.
Corey, that was really helpful. Thank you.
And as far as his presentation, Mr. O'Keefe's presentation, when he came into the emergency department, how would you describe his presentation upon his arrival there?
So he would have been, well, he was unresponsive and intubated, as in with a breathing tube into his airway via his
I
mouth.
appreciate that he defaulted into explaining
And
it.
as he came into the emergency department, what, if anything, was fixed to him in regard to CPR or other resuscitative efforts?
He was intubated.
So he would have had CPR in progress. And also someone would have been ventilating his lungs via the endotracheal tube.
Now, there's mention within that record as far as a cardiac arrest. Is that correct?
I don't know. I'm sorry. I don't understand what you're asking me.
Sure.
That's
Let
not
me
your
just
fault,
ask, you're
sir.
familiar with the term cardiac arrest.
Yes.
Can you describe to the jury, based on your training and experience, what your understanding of that term?
Sure. So as in he arrived
So the term cardiac arrest, could you explain that for the jury? That's it. Just a handful of words.
with in cardiac arrest, which by definition
Keep it simple for the
means that
dogs.
his heart was not autonomously or independently pumping blood, or in his case, without electrical activity as well of the heart.
And are you familiar with another term called perfusion?
Yes.
And can you explain what perfusion is and how that relates to
Just one
the condition
question.
of cardiac arrest?
Sure. So, for example, you and I right now, because our heart is autonomously, pumping blood,
Oh,
the
sorry,
heart
that's
is
me.
the pump and responsible for pushing blood throughout your body, therefore perfusing your body. In a scenario like this, where a
Waiting for Lolly
patient
to ask,
is
what is blood and do we need it?
in cardiac arrest
Until we get
or
back
asystole,
to-
or as in not having any electrical activity in his heart
John
or
specifically, we're gonna
mechanical activity of his heart, the
zoom
perfusion
in
that
at
is
1.25.
happening is by CPR, as in the chest being pushed upon. Indirectly is you call it maybe indirectly pumping or moving blood flow. So there is perfusion, but in a significantly limited compared to someone not in cardiac arrest.
And as far as that perfusion process is concerned, what, if any, relation does that have to the organs within the body?
Well, so if your perfusion is limited, then your organs are not getting the normal amount of blood flow and therefore oxygen and all the other nutrients that your blood's providing. So your organs will begin the process of failure.
with life, Lally.
You use the term in there as far as asystole. Could you explain to the jury what you understand that term to mean?
Sure. So
I'm just going to take a moment to clap because this has become one of my favorite things that Lolly says. Yep. So if any of you have a bingo going for this morning, Lolly pronouncing, and look, I have no phonemic awareness. I do not pronounce words well. If I have not heard them pronounced, I very much struggle. But I did work as an EMT who was married to a doctor whose sister-in-law is a surgeon. So when Lally says asystole, it just look, man, asystole. It just is asystole. It's asystole. I wonder the other medical professionals have tried to say asystole, and he keeps saying asystole. I just love it so much. Look, I'm looking for delight anywhere I can find it with this prosecutor, and the way he pronounces asystole is really the only thing I've got right now.
Asystole would be when you put the electrical leads on a patient's heart. The complete absence of intrinsic electrical activity from the heart would be asystole. So as in not having any observable or detectable electrical activity would be asystole.
Now, as far as these conditions, as far as cardiac arrest and asystole, what, if any, concerns does that
there he
raise
goes.
from a
Lolly
diagnostic
picked it up.
perspective in relation to Mr. O'Keefe?
I guess your question with respect to from a diagnostic perspective, I don't know exactly what you're asking me there.
Let me rephrase that. So with regard to those conditions that are observed and noted within the medical chart for Mr. O'Keefe that you have before you, how would that relate to his condition or sort of how he's presenting and what if anything you're doing treatment-wise?
Well, so
But Ellie will be delighted.
even with good CPR, the perfusion of the brain, for example, and this is what I think
Thank
about
you for all
frequently
the nurses in
during
the chat.
resuscitative efforts like this, as
Thank
in,
you.
I couldn't tell you an exact time, but there's a certain, without perfusion of the brain for a certain amount of time, you're limited with respect to, well, the concern is that the patient, even if you resuscitate their body, that there's potentially going to be brain death or anoxia or lack of oxygen to the brain and a poor outcome with respect to neurological outcome.
Now, as far as the resuscitative efforts are concerned, is there any sort of
outcome with
standards or
regard to
resuscitative
brain
protocols
activity
that would be undergone with someone who presents as Mr. O'Keefe did?
Yes.
And can you explain what those are?
Yes, what are the protocols?
So, in broad terms, there's ACLS, which is Advanced Cardiac Life Support. That's an algorithm that through medical training, I've learned and is frequently, the algorithm can be adjusted. There's also a ATLS for trauma patients.
I didn't realize there was an algorithm of all.
So there's an algorithm there with respect to resuscitation or guidelines, I guess, with respect to resuscitation.
Guidelines I'm familiar with. Algorithm,
And
not
within
as much.
those sort of guidelines or protocols, are you familiar with a medication called epinephrine?
Yes.
And how would epinephrine play into sort of the treatment or the diagnosis of Mr. O'Keefe?
So, in the time that I've been practicing, epinephrine is probably the only medication or drug that has persistently been in the ACLS pathway. It's adrenaline. So the idea is loosely that you're attempting to affect upon the heart itself.
I'm waiting for him to turn to the jury and be like,
more
have any of you seen
squeeze, as in more pressure, and also to increase the potential, or if there is electrical activity, to increase the amplitude of that electrical function at the cellular level.
Now, in addition to the cardiac arrest and the asystole, as far as Mr. O'Keefe was concerned, what, if any, presentation did he have related to hypothermia?
So I know his initial temperature was low. I'd have to look, but I can see here that the nursing wrote in their notes that his, I see T equals 80.1 R. So I interpret that to be his temperature was 80.1 degrees by rectal temperature.
That's cold.
And if you could explain to the jury sort of your understanding as far as hypothermia, what is it and how does that present itself?
Yeah, we're going back to 1.25.
So, as it pertains to this case,
1.25.
there's a few ways to get hypothermic.
My brain adjusted.
If I at 12:20 were to have a cardiac arrest right now and stop perfusing, my current temperature I'm guessing is 98.6, right? A normal temperature. Without perfusion, the body will the core temperature will decrease over time. The specifics of that I couldn't, or beyond my knowledge and training, but does that answer your question?
Yes. And so as far
If
as
you don't have blood
hypothermia
perfusing,
is
you get
concerned, is there a
colder.
certain sort of
The colder you
baseline
get,
or
the
what
less
is sort of
compatible it
the
is with life.
typical temperature under which someone would be declared sort of hypothermic or treated as such?
I don't know if I could give you a definition of medically what a quote diagnosis of hypothermia. I couldn't tell you a number.
He's like, I work in the
I can
ER,
tell you that
folks.
80 qualifies as hypothermia, but I couldn't tell you a number under which that definition
He's like,
applies.
they're cold. I send them
But the
to
temperature
not be
that
cold
Mr. O'Keefe
anymore.
presented with certainly fits within those parameters. Is that correct?
Yes, 80 degrees is very cold.
And as far as resuscitative efforts as they pertain to the core body temperature or the low core body temperature of Mr. O'Keefe, what, if anything, was done with relation to treatment of that?
Sure. So as the nursing note mentions, there's a bear hugger was applied. So that's a blanket that has warmed air being pumped through it. So that's a way of externally warming someone. He also, having reviewed the chart earlier, I don't see it right in front of you. Actually, I take that back. He had warm IV fluids running. So IV fluids not at room temperature, as in
Warmed up.
a warm or an oven of sorts, would have been given to him via intravenous or central venous access.
And as far as the body temperature is concerned, what if any relationship does the body temperature have and the warming process have as to a declaration of deceased in relation to Mr. O'Keefe?
Well, so there's a goal in resuscitative medicine to attempt to rewarm a body. Loosely, the idea being
To hope that maybe
that the heart, among other organs, will function better or function at all in a warmer environment. That's one goal of resuscitation. With him, as I recall, despite resuscitative efforts for approximately half an hour, there was not a significant warming of his core temperature.
And so, sir, with reference to Mr. O'Keefe, at some point.
well, that Jennifer, I have done. I just didn't know what it was called.
Yes.
And do you see any
Thank you.
indication within the chart as to what time that was?
Sure. I'll just need a moment here.
I mean,
According to my note, it looks like the time of death was, death declaration was 7:50 in the morning.
Is that 50 or 15?
50.
Now, as far as
7:50
the
a.m.
observations that you made as far as the
We are at
Sicily and the
1.25.
cardiac
7:50
arrest,
a.m.
that
was the
persists
declared
throughout
time
the
of
course
death.
of your treatment of Mr. O'Keefe?
Yes.
May I approach the witness?
Yes.
Let me just see that document.
So I got to be fair. All of you are talking about bear huggers after C-sections. My first one was such an emergency. I don't remember much of it. It's a conversation for a different day.
Direct your attention to what's the fourth page in, bottom of it says 2 of 4, and I direct your attention to the top of that page. Do you see that, sir?
Yes.
And as far as this is sort of a listing of
Jan Boyd,
observations.
thank you for bringing the context back for the audience.
Can you describe what is listed at the top of that page there?
Sure. So this would have been the physical exam documentation of my note. So with respect to the head, it says, excuse me, the first word is other, which I believe is a function of the computer system. As in, I typed in the right superior orbital ridge region, approximately 7 millimeter laceration, and then
I'm going to slow this down because I do want to know the injuries noted to the victim by the ER. Because, well, at this point, it's all we got because they have not actually called the coroner yet. So I'm putting this back to regular speed just for my brain.
It says, excuse me, the first word is other, which I believe is a function of the computer system. As in, I typed in the right superior orbital ridge region, approximately 7 millimeter laceration, and then with surrounding soft tissue swelling / contusion.
Sir, if I could just stop you there. As far as what you're talking about with the right superior orbital ridge region, could you explain to the jury or demonstrate to the jury?
Sure. So the orbital ridge is the bone above your eye that you can, like, where your eyebrow is or should, would normally be.
I think he was going to say should be.
As far as the other sort of things that you noted over the course of your physical exam or review of Mr. O'Keefe, what, if anything else of note, did you observe?
Well, according to my note, the only other kind of observations other than would be that he had breath sounds present bilaterally. I observed that he was pulseless. His abdominal exam was atraumatic on my chart, and then extremity exam or musculoskeletal exam, I wrote that he had superficial abrasions on the right forearm.
And from a medical perspective, when you use that term abrasions, so can you explain to the jury what you understand the term
Like
abrasions
furrows.
Yeah, I use it as a medical synonym for scratches, if you will.
And under
Superficial is interesting to me.
There's a listing as far as a GC3, is that correct?
Yes.
And can you explain what that is and what that means?
So GC is what I charted. What I intended to write there was GCS, which is a Glasgow Coma Scale, which is a scoring system to identify someone's level of consciousness or unresponsiveness.
And as far as the three, where does the scale start? Where does it go to, and where does the three fit in?
So there's three components: verbal function, motor function, and eye or ocular function. And someone who's completely unresponsive, as in no motor, no verbal, and no eye movement or function, completely unresponsive. The lowest you can get on the scale is 3.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, his pupils were fixed and dilated. So that doesn't surprise me that his LOC was 3.
Now, later on over the course of that same morning, did you have occasion to become involved in the treatment of another patient by the name of Karen Reed?
Yes.
And
So they've moved on from the treatment of John O'Keefe to the treatment of Karen Reed.
Yes.
Okay. He's reviewing his notes in the hospital printouts.
in general, sir, do you recognize what that is?
Yes.
Or what do you recognize it?
The first part I recognized would have been the medical record or medical note with respect to Miss Reed, who was also a patient that morning.
Thank you. Your Honor, the Commonwealth seeks to introduce in the minutes the next exhibit, a redacted copy of those records.
Regarding no objections, subjects for the redactions.
I saw a question in the chat and it scooted by. Here it is from Rosalind. Why wasn't the coroner called to the scene? He had to be warmed up before he could be pronounced, so they took him to the hospital as per their procedures. So no coroner at the scene because of the play of hypothermia.
Ms. Reed came into the emergency department at Good Samaritan that morning.
I mean, I can tell you from this chart, it looks like that at least the first posted vital signs were from 7:51 in the morning.
And in reference to Ms. Reed, what is it that she came into Good Samaritan in regard to? Why was she there?
I'd have to review Daisy's note. So
He's like, I don't know why she was there.
Well, let me ask you.
None of that
Was it
happens.
in reference to Section 12?
While I'm in the room.
yes,
And with regard to
That's
Section
leading.
12,
I sped this back
patients
up.
that come in regard to that, what kind of involvement?
Emily asked, is this not violating doctor-patient confidentiality? There are limits to confidentiality for almost every confidentiality except like legal and marital, but trial and court proceedings are one of those exceptions. So no, they are not.
Do you have, or who, if anyone, do you work with in regard to those types of patients?
sure. So Section 12, I would define as involuntary detention of
I've
a
sped this
person.
back up.
Usually for a mental health concern, whether that's self-harm or harm to others, or if someone who's, afflicted with schizophrenia or psychosis, members of the public can bring someone to or the police or members of the public can bring someone to the hospital on a Section 12, which, again, involuntarily detains them for evaluation.
And in addition to yourself, is there other staff? You mentioned that there were physician's assistants or nurses that were working. How much involvement would you typically
Lally,
have
what's
with
the
someone who comes in
question?
on that kind of prognosis and diagnosis?
I would say, to answer your question, my involvement is variable and dependent a lot of times on what that nurse practitioner or physician assistant feels like they need or want my involvement to be.
And what kind of involvement would you have as far as when someone comes in with that kind of issue? What is sort of the typical protocol or policies that Good Samaritan would undergo with reference to that patient? What are you doing with reference to the patient when they arrive?
I'm sorry, I think I don't really understand what the question is.
No, understood. Let me rephrase that. So with regard to a patient coming in on a Section 12, what happens with that person once they present in the ER?
So whether they're evaluated by me or a nurse practitioner or physician assistant, if that person feels like, based on their evaluation, that they need a mental health consult or evaluation, then they would have that initiated, as well as what we do for a lot of patients or all patients' vital signs, and sometimes blood work as well.
And when it comes to that sort of blood work or assay, as far as what's being done with someone who comes in with that kind of,
And this is the point of this with the blood work.
what is sort of being tested and what is being looked at as far as the blood work is concerned?
Well, there's a few reasons to get blood work, but in general, part of the evaluation is, with respect to the medical presentation, to make sure there's no medical emergencies present, in addition to whatever the mental health concern may be. There's also blood work drawn with respect to disposition, as far as some people, for example, it would be inappropriate to have a mental health evaluation if, for example, I were intoxicated on alcohol and my alcohol level were elevated, because I think the idea is that you're not getting, a true representation maybe of what's going on.
So am I correct in that someone presents and then there's you medically clear that person as far as any sort of injuries or anything like that first?
I wouldn't say first necessarily. I think a lot of times these processes happen in parallel.
So in parallel, you have the medical clearance and then sort of
They're happening at the same time, sir.
Sometimes, yes.
And then sort of involved in both of those, there would be blood drawn and reference to a Section 12, as far as a typical one would be looking for sort of alcohol and drugs of abuse, things that
I can't believe this is sped up. Honestly.
I mean, I'm hesitant to answer yes because of the word typical, because I wouldn't say there's really a typical presentation with respect to mental health presentations in the ER.
That's fair.
And from your
He was trying to word that well, but
memory
that's a
and/or
fair
your
statement.
chart, was that done as far as the blood work done with regard to Ms. Reed on this day?
You're asking me if blood work was drawn?
Yes.
I believe so. I have to double check.
Just
So, yes,
Rhonda
it looks
said,
like
I
there
think
was blood
section
work drawn.
12 is the equivalent of a
And
5150 in
among the things that
California.
were tested within the facility.
I will say section 12 is a little bit different from my experience with 5150 holds in California, in that it seems that the word of someone other than the observed behavior of the person who is being sectioned holds quite a lot of weight, because the testimony earlier was that her father called law enforcement, and then law enforcement, without talking to her again, just section 12'd her, even though they had let her leave the scene. So there are going to be differences. In Florida, it's Baker Act. There's other things, other places. But yes, it is an involuntary psych evaluation and hold.
And Good Samaritan was was an alcohol screen. Is that correct?
Yes.
And what is the result of that alcohol screen as contained within those records?
I'm going on now.
Do I answer or no?
Yes.
So it looks like 93.93. I'd have to maybe look deeper in the chart to tell you the units of that measurement. I don't want to guess. So to answer your question, 93.
Can I approach this briefly on?
Yes.
I just.
Kieran Reed was released pretty quickly. If you remember the testimony of the paramedics, they did not agree with the section 12, but once they had the order from law enforcement, they had to transport,
Direct your attention to
even though they disagreed with it. They seemed a little frustrated.
Do you see the units that 93 pertains to contained within that record, sir?
So yes, it looks like it's milligrams per deciliter.
Thank you, sir.
I have this sped
Can I
up.
approach this retrieve, Your Honor?
Yes.
Good afternoon.
Oh, let's go back. I missed. He was talking about the milligrams per deciliter. The questioning is so slow. The questioning is so slow that I totally missed it. Give me 1 second.
I'm directing your attention to it's a top portion of that.
Sure.
Do you see the units that 93 pertains to contained within that record, sir?
So yes, it looks like it's milligrams per deciliter.
Thank you, sir.
So 93 milligrams per deciliter
Can I approach
is
this retrieve, Your Honor?
the blood alcohol content. Remember, that is not always a neat flip flop, and we're going to get to other witnesses who talk about BAC.
Thank you, sir. I have no further questions of this witness, Your Honor.
And now we're getting to cross-examination.
Good afternoon.
Hi.
You testified that you treated Ms. Reed when she arrived at the hospital on January 29th, correct?
I don't know if I testified that I treated her, but I was involved in her care. Yes,
You actually wrote the reports regarding her care, correct?
that is not correct.
Would it refresh your recollection to take a look at the report?
He's like, I did not write the report.
The report, I believe we're talking about the note, the emergency room note was written by a nurse practitioner.
Would it refresh your recollection to take a look at some additional reports from January 29th?
Sounds like you want to show me some reports, so sure.
Sounds like you want to show me some reports. Yes, sir. She very much would like to show you some reports.
Yes.
Yep, okay.
Is your recollection refreshed? Do you recall treating Ms. Reed on January 29th?
I do not.
Do you recall writing a report that has your name, Justin Rice, on it from January 29th?
No, it depends what you define report as. To best answer your, well,
How
do
you
I recall
define
writing
report?
this note? No. Was that what your question was?
So is it your testimony that do you recall treating Ms. Reed at all?
No, I don't.
Do you recall actually ordering her blood in this case?
No,
Do you recall sending it out to the labs at all?
No.
no,
As you sit here today, you don't know who collected the blood?
that's correct.
You don't know who packaged the blood?
That would also be a fair assessment, yes?
And you don't know who submitted that to the lab?
Correct.
And it wasn't you, correct?
I can confidently say that I did not collect blood work. Yeah, I did not do that.
Okay.
He was like, yeah, he's like, I was the floor physician, but that was all handled. I would imagine that was all handled by the nursing staff.
You testified that you treated Mr. O'Keefe.
And he was just like, no, I didn't
Yes.
do any of this.
Did a firefighter ever approach you on the morning of January 29th and tell you that he had information suggesting that the victim had been struck by a vehicle?
Objection.
Do you remember that?
I do not.
So if a firefighter indicated that he informed you that he had information suggesting that Mr. O'Keefe had been in some sort of vehicular accident, that's something that you would have included in your report, correct?
I don't know if that's a fair assumption.
But as you sit here today, you have no recollection whatsoever of anyone telling you that the victim had appeared to be in some sort of car accident, correct?
Well, I think, I don't have it in front of me, but I think my note that I prepared for Mr. O'Keefe states that per EMS
Sorry, what was that?
Dr. Rice, you have no record. Apologies.
So I don't think he finished his answer.
He didn't.
So I
finish
think
his
that
answer.
what I was trying to say, right, was that on my note it says per EMS report. So one of the medics, as in one of the folks on the ambulance who brought Mr. O'Keefe in, again, I'm not right in front of my note, but as I recall, it said something to the effect of per EMS report, the patient may have been struck by a vehicle.
Can I show you a copy of that report?
Please.
More notes are always better than less.
May I approach? You can take a last question. Is your recollection
course.
refresh?
Yes.
Is there anywhere on that report that says that the patient came in and there was a statement by EMS that the victim appeared to have been struck by a vehicle?
Just give me a moment to read through the.
Sure.
So no, there's not.
In fact, there's no mention of a vehicle whatsoever, correct?
That's correct.
Dr. Rice, did you observe Mr. O'Keefe's injuries when he arrived at the hospital that morning?
I guess you'd have to define what observe injuries means.
What?
Well, during the course of your treatment, did you inspect him for injuries?
So
Were you treating him? What? What? What are we doing? Stop it. You're a medical professional. You're not on any side here. Just, you did what you did. He came in. He was non-responsive. He was cold. We had to warm him up first. Then we would evaluate further. But if we warm him up and nothing happens, then there's nothing we can do.
yes.
You testified that you observed certain abrasions and scratches on his right arm, correct?
Yes.
Aside from his injuries to his right arm, and I believe you described sort of a laceration above his eye, John O'Keefe did not have a single other injury on his body from the neck down, correct?
I don't know if that's fair to say.
Well, you didn't report a single injury to his shoulders, correct?
Correct.
You did not report a single injury to his chest, correct?
Correct.
You did not report a single injury to his torso, correct?
Correct.
You did not report a single injury to his back, correct?
Correct.
You also did not report a single injury to his ribs, correct?
Correct.
No injury to his hips, right?
Correct.
You observed no injury to his knees, correct?
I reported no injuries to his knees. Correct.
No injuries to his shins, correct?
Correct.
No injuries to his ankles, right?
Correct.
And no injuries to his feet.
Correct.
From the neck down, he did not have a single broken bone, right?
I don't know if that's a fair assessment or statement.
You certainly didn't notate in your report that he had any broken bones from the neck down, correct?
No, I did not.
No,
I'd happy to explain that, but to answer your
Broken
question, no, I did not.
bones.
You did not report a single fracture from the neck down,
I mean, I
correct?
think you would need
I did not report a single fracture. Correct.
X-rays for that.
The injuries that you testified to today were that he had sort of a laceration above his eyelid, correct?
The injuries that I testified to today, correct, yes.
And the scratches on his right arm.
On the right forearm, yes.
No further questions.
Okay, Mr. Lally?
Dr. Rice, with reference to
And now he's going to have the opportunity to explain.
fractures or broken bones, can you explain sort of why that may not have been noted, or why that wasn't included within the chart?
Sure. Yeah, I'd like to. So with a patient like Mr. O'Keefe who came in, the focus of myself and the team of physician assistant, nurse practitioner, and nurses, whoever was helping in a
Making
case like
sure
this,
we
the
do
focus
everything we
is
can
in
to
core
pronounce them.
resuscitative medicine, of securing an airway, making sure he has a breathing tube in, making sure that the CPR is being applied the right pressure to the right place, making sure that the core resuscitative elements of medicine are happening, unless, as in the mind can only focus on so much. So I think in cases like this, because the attention is on resuscitation of someone's heartbeat, their life, there's less focus on injuries or observations that don't coincide with the resuscitation effort, or not pertinent to that resuscitative effort. If that if that answers your question.
So in that vein, it's not like you're doing X-rays or a full skeletal survey or something like that.
No, we're not doing a full skeletal survey. No.
Because you're more concerned with the fact that his body core temperature is 80, his
That's
heart is
leading.
pumping blood, and his pulse, correct?
Correct,
Judges,
unless
if
there
my
was an
guests get a little
extremity
too
injury
loud.
that would be pertinent to his resuscitation. If he had had a traumatic amputation, as in removal of a leg, for example,
It's like we would have
that would
noted
be
that.
pertinent to a resuscitation. But an otherwise intact extremity,
He's like, doesn't matter for their purposes.
that is not necessarily
At
within the
that
realm of
time.
resuscitation.
Right.
Can I approach the witness?
Yes.
I'm trying out different various like squishy handles for my my pen.
I'm going to direct your attention on document
Always
discharge
your hand.
mental impression. If you could just read from that, look up when you finish. Read to yourself.
We have not gotten to
I'm
the
sorry,
medical
would you like me to read
examiner
out
yet.
So as far as the chart is concerned, as far as your clinical impression of Mr. O'Keefe, can you read sort of what you...
Sure, right. So I wrote clinical impression, cardiac arrest, head trauma, exposure to environmental cold.
May I approach this to retrieve him?
Yes.
No further questions.
Anything further, Ms. Little?
No further questions.
All right, thank you, doctor. You are all set.
Thanks.
So he had noted cardiac arrest, head trauma, exposure.
It's 10 minutes of one. Jurors, can we do an abbreviated lunch today so we can get as much of the testimony in as possible? So it's 10 minutes of one. Why don't we come back here at 1:30? And can we go until 4:30 today? People seem to say yes. If that changes, just let Officer Delano or Officer Lyden know. Okay, thank you. So we'll see you back here
I
at
hate
1:30.
that they go immediately to the break screen.
You are muted.
All right. Now we've reached lunch. So now we are going to go to the audio that I like better after lunch. And we're going to resume with the pathologist that I accidentally started the day with today. So we're going to go back to the pathologist. I saw a couple questions come in. One of them was, don't lawyers learn? Elizabeth Me asked, do attorneys not learn ER protocols? How ER protocols work? No, not unless you have a doc that will actually sit down with you before trial and tell you. But oftentimes they try to avoid service and are really pissed off. I had to call docs for assault cases to show victim injuries. That was more common in homicide cases. You just generally call the coroner. But in assault cases, sometimes you have to, it's hearsay for the victim to say, I had this broken arm or that, because that's making a medical diagnosis and they were told that. They can testify to bruises and scratches and how they felt and pain. So we would bring in doctors. They were never happy to miss work. Their schedules are not super fluid, and their employers are not super flexible with them, and there's anywhere they rather be. But in a courtroom, I also think docs, and this is my generalization of docs, so docs in the chat, if I am wrong, feel free to let me know. But I also think docs generally see all court as court, and docs' goal is to not be in court. Like, not be in court at all. No court for doc. So they're not happy with it most of the time. Samantha Baker said, who came up with the cause of death? The coroner, and we have not heard from the coroner yet. So we are going to go to the pathologist. Let us resume back in court. This is going to be regarding, I believe, the blood alcohol level
All right,
of
so your
Karen
next
Reed.
witness, Mr. Lally.
Yes, Your Honor. The Commonwealth called Dr. Gary Fowler to the stand.
So This is our next witness. I'm going to try to zoom where I can. I just lost my page in my notebook. Ugh. What did I do? Oh, this is so good. Being able to go in and add pages like in the middle of my notes is just.
Raise your right hand, please. You solemnly swear the evidence you give the court and jury in the case now here the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So
Greg has made a comment in the chat about the coroner's report. Greg, I haven't seen it because we haven't seen the coroner yet.
Whenever
Beep
you're
boop, I
ready,
appreciate
Mr.
that.
Lally.
Or bebop. I appreciate that.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
Could you please state your name and spell your last name for the record?
Gary Fowler, F as in Frank, A-L-L-E-R.
And sir, that microphone in front of you, you can move that
Okay.
any way you wish. So if you want to bring it up or down, just the wand itself.
Lally, you telling people so to be louder is hilarious.
And what do you do for work, sir?
I'm a pathologist.
And where is it that you work?
I work at Good Samaritan Medical Center.
And how long have
I'm
you
at
been working as a
1.25.
pathologist at Good Samaritan?
Since
Aren't I at
November
1.25?
of 2015.
Oh, no, I'm not. Oh, thank God.
Now, if I could ask
That
you
was
a few
already
questions about
painful.
Your educational background, starting with your undergrad, where did you go to school? And
Thank
what
you, Greg.
receive a degree in?
My undergraduate education, I went to Tufts University.
Amy, I'm using
So, doctor, I'm going to ask you to put the microphone perhaps
the
underneath
remarkable.
your mouth and speak
Oh,
into
okay.
it, because in order to keep this room cool, we need to have these fans going. If they can't compete with you, we'll have to turn them off, and I think everybody would prefer to have them on. So please speak loudly.
How am I now? Okay.
No
Okay.
apologies.
So Tufts
I
University,
switched to the
undergraduate,
remarkable this trial.
I have a degree in biology.
Not sponsored. Went and bought it. Really liking it so
You
far.
received your degree in biology from Tufts.
I should put it in my Amazon store
I
so you
went
guys
to
can just
Tufts
see it.
Medical School in Boston for 4 years there.
And after you graduated from medical school, where did you go from there?
I went to a residency in pathology, anatomic and clinical pathology.
Great, you're qualified.
Was at Tufts Medical Center. So I stayed within the Tufts
What's it have to do
system.
with this case?
Okay.
And how long was that residency?
That residency
gonna be
was,
witness
at the time,
47.
pathology residency was 5 years. It's now 4 years, I believe, but it's a 5-year program. I finished the residency with chief of resident in pathology with my 5th year.
Well, congratulations on being chief resident,
Following your
sir.
residency, where did you go for work from there?
In 1996, I finished residency, and my first job was at Kearney Hospital, beginning the end of June of 1996.
And how long did you work at Kearney?
I'm still on medical staff at Kearney, so ever since I was transferred to help Good Samaritan Medical Center in 2015. My full-time job is at Good Samaritan now since 2015, but I still
Have
cover Kearney
privileges.
Hospital every now and then.
Okay.
And are you board certified?
I am board certified in both anatomic and clinical pathology.
Okay.
You've used that term, and just if you could explain to the jury what your understanding of that term is as far as pathology and sort of the difference between anatomic pathology and clinical pathology.
Sure.
This is helpful for the
pathology,
jury. They need
there's
this.
two subspecialties, I guess, in pathology. One is anatomic pathology, which is basically if you, as a patient, go to a hospital or have a biopsy, or a tissue biopsy, or an excision, or anything like that, it comes to the pathology department, and an anatomic pathologist is responsible for making the diagnosis for that patient. So we abbreviate that as an AP, anatomic pathologist. So in residency, you can also train to become a clinical pathologist. And clinical pathologist is a pathologist who basically deals with, to put it simply, if you have a blood test that
Right.
goes to
Skin
that
versus
gets sent to
blood.
the lab,
Or tissue versus
we are
blood.
essentially responsible for the quality and the safety of that blood test to help ensure
Or tissue
the
versus
lab tests
fluid,
that are done on the specimens are
to be more
accurate.
specific.
Now, with regard to your position at Good Samaritan, what is it that you do at Good Samaritan? What are your sort of duties and responsibilities in relation to that hospital?
I am the chief of pathologist at Good Samaritan Medical Center. I'm also the laboratory medical director. So my job at Good Samaritan is
stuff.
to ensure, quality of both the anatomic pathology
Lab.
side of things as well as the clinical pathology side of things. Ultimately, my job is to help ensure that any laboratory report coming from Good Samaritan is accurate.
Now, the lab at Good Samaritan where the testing is done, is that accredited?
Yes, it is.
And can you explain to the jury sort of what that accreditation means, who it's by, and sort of what goes into that accreditation process?
We are accredited by the College of American Pathologists.
The people that do the
abbreviate
things.
that as CAP, if I mention that later, just so you know. And the accreditation process, the CAP has been in business for 75 years or so. They, according to their website, are the preeminent accrediting body for medical laboratories. So what that means is every 2 years we have an in-depth laboratory survey. That's every 2 years, and there are
To everyone who's had to do with accreditation at work, I'm sorry.
Checklist
Always
requirements
seems like a nightmare.
that the CAP will look at in our lab, which ranges from anywhere, for quality, mainly quality control, making sure that we have enough staff members, just about anything that can affect a laboratory result. There is essentially a checklist requirement that we need to fulfill and pass. So that's every 2 years.
And is that accreditation, is that up to date as of now?
Yes, it is. We will be having another inspection. Our
Another
window
survey?
opens in July, so it's coming up. We have a 3-month window where the CIP can come anytime unannounced. So
Delightful
And was that
for you.
accreditation up to date prior to January 29th, 2022? Now, as far as the clinical portion of the lab, what are some of the things that get tested as far as
I'm sped
what
up,
are some of the things
Chad.
that are tested for
I'm
in the lab
sorry.
as far as blood work is concerned?
It is sped up.
Many different things. As probably all of you know, when you go to a hospital, you have your blood
Kiki,
tested.
you didn't miss much.
And the physician is looking for different tests, such as like a sodium, a potassium, a chloride, some basic tests that if they show abnormality, that could help them help the clinician make a diagnosis on you. So the most common things would be like a glucose, sodium, potassium, chloride, stuff like that.
Now, is there's some sort of like standard algorithm for things that are tested, or does it sort of dependent on the patient's presentation?
I think it's depends on the patient's presentation. There's no standard ordering test that one can order. So it depends mainly on what the doctor
Depends
is
on
thinking.
what you're looking
in his
for.
differential diagnosis. He will order a variety of different tests. Some tests are pretty standard. When you go to a hospital, they might order the test that I just talked about. A CBC, they want to look at your complete blood count.
Just a little louder, please.
Okay, sure.
It depends on what you're looking for.
Want to look at your hemoglobin, hematocrit, maybe sodium, potassium. Those are some of the really common tests that would get ordered in the hospital.
Now, as far as drugs of abuse, including alcohol, is that something that's dependent upon the presentation of a patient to your facility?
I think an alcohol test or a drug of abuse test is not a routine type of order or test. It all depends on if the clinician or
I
the
imagine
primary
for
care
a section
physician
12
is
it
suspecting
would be
could
routine though.
drugs of abuse or alcohol
This
on
is the
board. And we
thing.
need to know
This is Lally.
if so, to
This
help.
is Lally asking bad questions because the pathologist doesn't know. The last doctor said it, that on a section 12, you're regularly going to test for drugs or alcohol because you need to make sure that the drugs or alcohol aren't causing what you're seeing, and they can. So
Treat the patient.
also for all of you just popping in, because I just saw our numbers jump, this is live court from last week. So last Tuesday, when they took a break for the niece and nephew to testify, I also took a break because I had a friend in town. And so we are catching back up on this testimony. And I will tell you, I am very glad I went to give my friend a tour of Nashville and go to the Assembly Food Hall, because I would have felt bad if this is what we sat through. And my friend was sitting in my living room waiting for me to get to spend time because she was here from out of state. So, oh yes, I forgot to put captions back on. Thanks,
that
Chad.
also includes sort of a patient that presents in regard to a mental
That was on
health
me.
status or Section 12.
My brain was
would that be something
numb.
standard in relation to testing or blood work that's done in relation to that kind of patient?
As far as Section 12, I do not know if there is a standing order for a routine ordering process
I would
for
imagine there is.
a patient that is admitted to Good Samaritan under Section 12. So I'm not sure.
Would that be abnormal, though, as far as doing a blood draw and testing for alcohol and someone presenting on Section 2?
I don't think so, no.
Now, with regard to a blood draw in Good Samaritan Hospital with reference to testing for alcohol specifically, what, if any, sort of policies or protocols are in place in reference to that type of blood draw?
I think a test for blood alcohol is the phlebotomist pretty much has to run through the same protocol that he or she needs to follow for any type of blood test, except for the fact that we do not want to use an alcohol swab to clean the area before the blood draw.
That makes sense.
In theory, if you use an alcohol swab and you're testing for alcohol, then you can, in theory, contaminate the blood sample with some of the residual fluid of the alcohol. Some people say if you let the alcohol swab dry for 30 seconds, it's not going to contaminate it, but we don't go by that process. We have it specifically in our policy never to use an alcohol swab when an alcohol test is ordered.
Now, in that vein, doctor, with reference to
Okay.
Good Samaritan emergency department,
Good policy.
what, if any, precautions have you or your facility taken in regard to those types of blood draws in testing for alcohol with regard to alcohol wipes being used?
My phlebotomy supervisor has removed essentially all, not 100%, but all of the alcohol swabs down in the emergency room. So a phlebotomist who
Can't
perhaps could,
accidentally.
forget, which they shouldn't, because we have competency policies for them. So we have that in place where she's removed almost all of them so somebody can't mistakenly use a swab down in the emergency room.
Okay, so keep your voice up again, please, doctor, especially at the end of your sentences. Thank you.
The thing is that
To remove those alcohol wipes.
I imagine Karen Reed's blood alcohol is going to be hotly contested here. And it's just, we have to go through it because, well, what if they use the wrong type of swab? Can come up, but okay.
From the Emergency Department of Good Samaritan, does that predate January 29th, 2022?
It's been in place for a long time. Before that, there was a policy they would use betadine for swabbing, but that policy has been in place for a long time, and before that day of 2022.
You've spoken a little bit about, as far as phlebotomists working within Good Samaritan. If you could just explain to the jury sort of what is a phlebotomist and what is it that they do?
He's now
A
breathing directly
phlebotomist
on the mic,
is,
so that's helpful.
Is any person who is trained to draw your blood when you come to a hospital. So we come in, we train people to draw the blood.
And as far as with regard to phlebotomists at Good Samaritan, you mentioned that there's some proficiency testing or some protocols that they have to adhere to. Can you explain that a little bit more to the jury as far as what's involved in those?
So with anybody who works in the laboratory, per CAP checklist requirements and the government's requirements, there has to be competency policies and assessments on anybody who works in our laboratory, including phlebotomists. So any new phlebotomists, they get an initial training, and they'll get a training, and then they have to be assessed to make sure that they know what they need to do for their job, including knowledge of all policies. Then after that, after initial training, our competency policy states that we need to assess them again at 6 months. We do the same thing, make sure they know what they're doing. And then 6 months from that, so that's a year from when they started working for us, and then annually thereafter. So the CAP is, we have all these competency policies for everyone.
There's competency
to
policies
make
for
sure
phlebotomists. I just can't. Can you tell us what the blood was?
There are two of our policies that we have for Good Samaritan Medical Center, one for the phlebotomist, one for our laboratory technicians.
They have policies.
The first one is a patient preparation for specimen collection policy, which defines our policy for drawing the blood for the phlebotomist. The second is an alcohol policy, which is one of, I don't know, thousands of policies that we have in the lab to describe how our policy for alcohol testing. Every laboratory test in our hospital has a separate policy.
Everything from hematocrit to sodium to potassium chloride has its own policy, is that correct?
Correct.
And the policy you have before you, that's for alcohol tests?
Correct.
And those two policies that you have before you, were those policies, what was in place on January 29th, 2022?
Correct.
Great.
Yes.
May I approach again?
Okay.
Policies.
In court report, I don't think we marked SS.
I believe so.
I'm going to
It's true,
zoom
it's
as
one
they are marking the policies.
I believe 107 is in reference
Zoom.
in relation to a patient named Karen Reed that visited the Good Samaritan
There we
on
go.
January 29th, 2022. Is that correct?
Correct.
Now, with reference to
For those of you
Yes.
asking about live court, I'm catching up on court from last week that I missed. So we have the full trial. We've covered it together. This
portion of those records, do you see
this this doc
Larry,
seems
you have to keep your voice up on the
incredibly intelligent,
Let me say it
and
again, Chris.
I get the
Dr. Whitmer?
sense that he is struggling with trying to make his very high level of knowledge understandable, but also Lally's questions are terrible, and so it's tough to bring your very high level of knowledge down, especially if most of his time is spent talking to people in his profession. It can be very hard, especially for people that are highly intelligent, sometimes to bring down their level of knowledge. And he seems to be trying to do it well while fighting difficult questions. But what's going to be hard in this case is that I don't know who drew the blood for Karen Reed, and that's going to come up. But let's see what the result is and then hopefully
Those
move
records on
on.
the page that I've opened up to, do you see a
This
a
should be the
record in
test
regards to
results. This should be the testing results for Karen Reed's blood. Remember, she is charged with a DUI causing death. So this matters.
a lab result for alcohol testing with regard to Ms. Reed?
Yes.
And what is it reported as, sir?
It is reported at 93 milligrams per deciliter.
And is that, as far as milligrams per deciliter, is that a
That's the
relatively
result.
standard way of reporting an alcohol result?
Yes, it is in the
In the
our
lab
hospital
setting.
systems.
Could you explain to the jury sort of milligram per deciliter what that reading means as far as the metric that's used there?
Well,
It means there's
it's,
alcohol.
Means 93 milligrams of alcohol per deciliter of the blood.
And as far as, if you could explain to the jury sort of the testing process or the protocols that are in place at the Good Samaritan, so the blood is drawn
I
by
don't
the
think we
phlebotomist, and then
I don't think we
what
know
happens
who exactly drew the
there
blood
for
here
testing?
yet. It's probably in the notes.
Okay, so
Right,
in
but
our-
before you do that, doctor, so we might have to turn off the fans, which we don't want to do. I really need you to keep your voice up. So
I feel like this doctor is speaking at his normal speaking volume and the court's just yelling at him, which is not going to make it worse. He does not seem extremely comfortable in this setting. Yeah. Oh, Bev.
so that the court officer over there, so that folks down there can hear you.
okay, so at Good Samaritan,
He's like, I'm trying.
I can go through the process. The doctor will order the test in the emergency room. We have 2 phlebotomists down in the emergency room. That test will print out, the order will print out down in the emergency room. And it will print out a label for the blood tube. It will print out on that label the color of the blood tube to be ordered, and will also print out what on the label what is to be tested in our lab. So that order will be seen by our phlebotomists in the emergency room. They will then locate the patient and perform the venipuncture or the blood draw. And use a correct tube. They'll go through their process of one of the most important processes in testing somebody's blood is accurate patient identification. So within our policy, we ask the patient to state his or her name, first and last name and date of birth. We have them say it out loud to make sure we have 2 forms of identification. Once that's confirmed, there is also a bracelet on the patient, so we'll match it up with a Good Samaritan ID number. So the first step is to make sure we have the correct patient. So then the phlebotomist has the order in front of her or him,
for
and
drawing blood.
uses the correct tube. make sure before drawing, they have to find the correct vein, a good vein for the patient, which is usually in the forearm antecubital fossa area. They will find that vein. They will cleanse the area with a non-alcohol swab, which in this case was the order was for alcohol.
All right, so doctor, I'm sorry. I'm going to stop you. I think part of it is that you're saying so much and your voice is fine and then it drops.
That's
And it's fine and
rude.
it drops. So Paul, can we turn the fans off, please?
She's looking at her court officer who's at the back by the back of where the jury is. And if the court officer back by the very end jurors can't hear, that's where it's a problem. Honestly, the jury is just like, sure.
It's important that all the jurors hear everything you say.
It
doctor.
is.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay.
He's trying.
But
I'm speeding it up.
into the
I'm going to
microphone.
bring it.
Ma'am, he's talking directly into the microphone. I can hear his nose hairs at this point. He is doing the best that he can, Your Honor. She's just so rude. She's like, no fans for you.
Really close.
All right, this should be better with
and hopefully you can turn it back on when I get better at this. So I'm sorry. It's hot. I'm hot too.
This poor man is just like, I'm doing the best I can. He's like, I'm hot. You're hot. We're all hot. None of us want to be here. I'm so sorry. But it's just...
So one is we make sure that it's correct patient identification. We use the correct tube.
I sped him up.
We don't use an alcohol swab. We use one that doesn't contain an alcohol in that. Then
for those of you asking about
phlebotomist will
courtroom
then,
speakers,
put the labels on the tube or tubes in front
can't
of the
do
patient.
much with them. It's a
Then
very
bring
old
it back to his or her
courtroom.
area. Make sure they sign their name on, they initial their name on the tube as well as the time. Then it will be put into a
Yeah, she's like, no fan for
bag.
you.
And in
Chat.
the emergency room, it goes through a chute and it goes directly to our laboratory for testing. Once we get it, it's called receiving the blood work.
It's too
The
loud.
technician, lab tech in our lab will scan, there's a barcode on the label, they'll scan it and that will document the time that we received it. They will also manually enter the name of the phlebotomist and the time of the blood draw, so we have accurate records of what we received and the time. Once that's done, it's entered into our system. And then the technician will decide what needs to go next. In this case of an alcohol test, we're using a green top tube, which has lithium heparin, has an anticoagulant in it. It's to prevent clotting. So we'll get that tube, and once it's
I'm kind of always fascinated by the different top tubes and how specific the different top tubes are to the different testing being run. So I kind of love that he's like, no, this is why it's the green top tube. This is what's in the green top tube so that we can do the blood test for alcohol fast.
entered, we will centrifuge it.
Fascinating.
And that is centrifuged for about 10 minutes or so, so that we can separate the layers of the blood in the blood.
And then you
when
test
first see
what?
blood, it's all red. And there's no
test the
separation
plasma?
of the elements.
I would
But
imagine
within
that they
blood, there are red blood cells. There are white cells or inflammatory cells. And there's the liquid portion of the blood. So for alcohol testing, we there's an anticoagulant in it. And so we will centrifuge it to separate the different layers of the blood. The different layers, the red cells will go to the bottom, and the aqueous portion or the plasma portion will go to the top. And when we test for blood alcohol in our lab, we're testing the aqueous portion or the plasma portion of the blood. So that's why it's important for us to centrifuge it and separate the components. Once that is done,
That
takes
was
about
me
10 minutes
under
or so,
review. I'm sorry.
maybe
That made
a
me
little bit longer.
cackle.
Then that tube will be brought
And
over
snort a
to
little
our
bit.
machine, which is a Roche Cobas machine, and it will be put onto the machine. And that
spun.
machine will test for the alcohol or whatever else is ordered on the patient.
Okay.
I think I covered everything.
You sure did,
With
sir.
regard to, you used the term a couple times as far as a centrifuge. Can you describe to the jury sort of what that is and how that instrument works?
Sure. So when the tube that we take is a blood tube, and we want to test the aqueous plasma portion of the blood.
So
And
they are
only way
testing
to
the
get that
plasma portion of the blood.
the watery solution of the blood, is we put
For
it in
the alcohol
centrifuge,
content.
which will spin the blood at a
Which for medical purposes, look, as we're talking DUI, for medical purposes, what they're going to test is different than what they might test for driving under the influence for legal purposes. So they are not testing, when Karen Reed is there on a Section 12, they are testing her blood to see if what's going on with her, or if anything is going on with her medically that might be impacting her mental state. We heard from the paramedics that they thought her mental state was being impacted by the fact that she had been doing CPR on a loved one and was covered in her blood. I tend to agree with them. She seemed to be having, to me, a normal trauma response to a very traumatic situation. But her dad called in a Section 12, law enforcement wrote it up, and the paramedics seemed to begrudgingly transport her to the hospital because you don't want to ignore a situation and have it become worse. If in fact this, she was at risk for harming herself. So they are testing her blood for medical purposes to see what is going on with her. But when you're testing it in a legal situation, I don't know if this hospital would do a different blood test. In most states, blood draws generally need a warrant if you're drawing blood for DUI. You can have people, of course, agree to a blood draw or agree to a breathalyzer. So we're talking about two different things with what they are testing here. And remember, they are drawing her blood. I think we're going to get to it, but they're drawing her blood sometime around 9 o'clock in the morning, and they're going to try to extrapolate that to what her BAC would have been when driving. But there are some problems with that, and we'll talk about it in a minute.
Rapid rate, something like 3,300 RPMs or so, which is fast, and it will.
We're going to
separate the blood
zoom
into
through
those
this quickly.
three, layers. Also, in the tubes that we use is a gel that comes in the tube, and it nicely separates the red blood cell component from the water or aqueous plasma component, and keeps those two portions of the blood separate to make it easier for us to test on our machine.
Now, as far as the blood testing is concerned, is there a difference between sort of what's known as whole blood versus serum and plasma?
Yes.
There is a difference. Whole blood test drawn, and
there is a difference.
Plasma centrifuge process
Would record as far as a higher percentage of
this
serum,
is important.
Plasma versus the whole blood.
I don't know if he will know this, but they separate the blood in the centrifuge to plasma and blood cells.
A serum, we're actually separating the components of the blood by the centrifuge process.
Now, which of the two, as far as serum, plasma versus the whole blood, which would record as far as a higher percentage of
I don't know if he knows that.
Alcohol, the answer would be plasma or serum would have a little bit higher.
Right. I paused.
Blood alcohol content compared to whole blood.
Right.
As far as the separation that you're talking about, is there a specific area as far as
So what he said was the plasma reading, which is what they do, could read a little bit higher for the blood alcohol content than if you tested the entire blood. But it matters because they are trying to extrapolate how intoxicated Karen Reed would be at the time they assume that she's driving. So it's a different thing because they are trying to use a medical test for what it's not designed for to backwards work her BAC when driving. But all the testimony we have, even from people that seemingly do not really like Karen Reed, witnesses that don't like her, everyone said she didn't seem intoxicated. Every single person seemed to say that she was not intoxicated. The only person who said she was intoxicated was her. So Anna asked, is the Section 12 to circumvent a warrant? I don't think so. I don't think anyone had any indication at the time her dad called the Section 12 that there was a possibility that she had been drinking and driving. None of the paramedics said she smelled like alcohol coming off of her breath or coming off of her body. Anyone who has had a night out drinking or been around someone who's had a night out drinking the next morning in a closed, small space, you can often tell. I wouldn't expect law enforcement outside to know that because of the temperature and the weather, but the paramedics in the ambulance transporting her didn't say she smelled of alcohol. When somebody smells of alcohol, you can tell. None of the friends said she seemed like she was drinking that night. The niece didn't seem to mention that when she was yelling at her in the morning looking for John O'Keefe that she just reeked of alcohol. Carrie Roberts and Jen McCabe didn't say we were in the small car with her and she reeked of alcohol coming off of her when we were talking. No one has said that. So the DUI is hard for me, but there's no other external evidence except for this BAC. She might have gone, we'll talk about it. Let's get through the rest of the testimony and we'll talk about it later. I think this is going to be a difficult
Separation
charge.
is concerned where alcohol tends to concentrate within.
Colleen,
Yes,
she did say
alcohol,
that.
Tends to go into the more into the watery or the aqueous component of the blood. So
She did say that.
When we like serum or plasma has a 98%, reportedly 98% water component. Whole blood, if you look at the whole blood overall, it has a lesser percentage.
Anyone feel like they're in
it's-
chemistry class?
If you look in the literature, it can be 86% or there's a range. But so since
I can see why he's the lab director.
alcohol
He's
tends to go
clearly
to the
very
watery components,
knowledgeable.
if you measure alcohol like we do in hospitals on the serum or plasma, the value that we get will always be a little bit higher than total, than
But
measuring on whole blood.
For medical treatment, I think for medical treatment, again, not a medical professional. This is me speculating. I would imagine for medical treatment that erring a little higher on blood alcohol is probably helpful for them to make sure there aren't medication interactions, that this is not the cause of whatever's going on with the patient, that for them, a slightly higher reading is beneficial in the medical setting because of what they're using it for versus a court setting when you have law enforcement showing up with a warrant, drawing blood, and their blood testing for BAC is a different process than this.
Training experience, sort of a conversion that can be done between sort of what's reported as a testing from serum plasma to a whole blood count?
In the hospital, we're pretty much in the business of
keep watching, Emily. We're trying to treat
reporting
people.
Alcohol, in serum or plasma, and we're not in the business of
I really like this, actually.
the legal aspects of
I should have just kept going.
of alcohol testing, because alcohol, what I understand is the alcohol legal limit in Massachusetts is 0.08
0.08.
grams per deciliter. We don't make any conversions in a hospital. We're not in that business.
That's not their
To do
purpose.
that, we just report on the serum percentage or the plasma level, and we don't make any attempts to do any official conversion to a whole blood level. If we did, we'd have to validate. We'd have to do many studies.
Thank you,
and we're
Kelly,
just
for
not
saying that better than I
in the
did.
business for that.
And I understand that's not how it's reported within your record or at the facility. What my question is.
No, Lally. He just said there's a whole bunch of reasons they do not convert their 93 milligrams per deciliters to anything else, because then the lab would need extra or additional certification and processes, and that's not the business that they're in.
Process by which you can sort of then mathematically convert from milligrams per deciliter.
They don't convert. He just said they
I
don't
am aware
convert.
of that. Recently, I had to read about it, but
They don't.
Recently, I was not aware. So I'm not in that. We're not in the business for.
Chat, if you want me to remind you
But
afterwards,
there is a formula.
tell
I
you
do
about the
know about
highest
it.
BAC DUI I ever
It's,
saw.
there is
and why it
if
shocked
one wants
me.
to convert a whole a serum or a plasma level to a
Because we
whole
sent it
blood,
out to be
there are
retested because
formulas
I didn't
that
believe it.
Basically, you need to. It's a simple formula, but there's.
Now, as far as this specific patient, the defendant, Ms. Reed, do you have any sense?
The
from
courtroom does not have
current
AC, is my
review as
understanding,
far as the timeline
Cleopatra.
of when the blood was drawn to when it was tested and reported?
At CrimeCon, I spoke to one of the on-air personalities from Court TV who has been in this courtroom, and he and I chatted a bit about how exceedingly hot it does get in this courtroom, which is really hard after lunch on a day of medical testimony.
Things of that nature.
To be sitting in the hot would make me want to die.
Was 9:03 in the morning.
There we go.
5 minutes later.
That's the testimony that's helpful. The order was at 9:03. We need the time. And when was the draw
The
done?
phlebotomist. It happened pretty fast. 5 minutes later, the phlebotomist got the labels printed. Then 5 minutes after that, they went in and drew it. It was very quickly. I don't have the numbers in front of me.
So what time was
but
the draw?
ultimately, it was received in our lab, I think, 10 minutes after the order, the blood, very quickly. And then the final result, when the alcohol level was reported in the computer system, was
What
I think,
time?
50 minutes from the time of the order.
So the draw would have been around 9:13 a.m. Around.
Yes.
So the draw would have been in that 9:10, 9:13 range.
Done pursuant to the testing and the policies and the protocols and everything in your lab was 93 milligrams per deciliter. Is that correct?
Correct.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Okay, we're on cross-examination. Shaylin, I'm so sorry. So the driver who hit me had a .255, which is a quite high BAC. I also had a friend killed in a DUI collision, and it was the driver's. The driver had multiple DUIs and was actually on probation for DUI and had a quite high BAC as well. It's incredibly frustrating. So I feel you.
You testified that hospitals are not in the legal business of calculating BACs. Do you recall that testimony?
Yes.
And you'd agree that there are differences between screening tests that are conducted at hospitals and forensic tests that are done in labs, correct?
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
And the purpose of testing in sort of a clinical setting at a hospital is to assist in the quick diagnosis and treatment of a patient. Is that right?
Yes, correct.
And so your priorities may be different than
Aaron, we'll talk
those
about
if you're in a
that.
forensic lab, where the goal is to ensure accuracy and reliability at all costs, correct?
I don't agree. Not correct.
Well, hospitals use serum tests to screen for the presence of alcohol, correct?
Correct.
And you'd agree that serum testing does not measure alcohol directly, but it actually measures the presence of NADH.
Correct.
And NADH is the byproduct that's created when the body breaks down alcohol.
Correct.
And the reason hospitals use a serum test rather than a whole blood test is because it's quick and efficient, and you can get test results within 20-ish minutes. Does that sound about right?
Correct.
I like this doctor's demeanor on cross. His demeanor didn't change at all. He's clearly listening to make sure the components of the question make sense in his brain and then answering. But this lawyer is also tremendously well prepared for this cross. And I think it's a good example of how to do the cross of an expert that is a neutral expert. This man was doing his job at the hospital, and the job at the hospital had nothing to do with this case or the thought that there was going to be a case or whatever. So he's just doing his work, and he's just careful in answering. I really like his demeanor quite a lot, and I like her questions. For those of you that said it sounds like she's doing a speech and not questions, it is cross-examination. So they are leading questions. So she's getting in the information that she wants to make it clear to the jury through that process. I think she's doing a really good job at it.
And you'd agree that NADH, which is what serum essentially tests for, can also be elevated by factors other than alcohol in the blood.
Yes.
I'm not aware of that.
Are you familiar?
But, yep.
Are you familiar with any medical literature that has found that NADH is created when the body has elevated either lactate or LDH in the system?
Correct. There are some issues,
Medical.
in our policy. There are some factors that can lead to falsely elevated or falsely lowered serum alcohol. One is lactic acid or LDH. Another one is Waldenstrom's macroglobulinemia, which is
Sure.
a hematological problem, and other things that can interfere with not just any test, or lipids, high levels of lipids, or hemolysis, or high levels of bilirubin. But our machines are very sophisticated now. If there are any elevations of, let's say, hemolysis or lipids or bilirubin,
Oh,
the Roche
interesting.
machines will detect that.
The machine will
and
flag it.
as a possible interference, or it won't even let us
Interesting.
result a test. So with any test, there can be interferences.
Alicia, I'm
and
covering
sure
the day
there can
I
be
missed.
interferences with the forensic way of testing as well.
Jessica, I flagged your statement. We're going to talk about that when I get to my story. It's wild.
And therefore, NADH also include things like trauma, muscle weakness and loss of muscle tissue, or abnormal tissue formation. Is that correct?
And her questions are going specifically to the fact that this defendant has MS. That's what she's talking about. Stress levels, activity levels, because everyone has testified that Karen Reed was running around that morning and giving CPR.
Have you read studies about that?
I haven't read those studies, no.
Would you agree that there may be other sort of medical stressors or things that can't necessarily be captured by the technology, but that could cause error in testing?
He's probably not going to agree to that.
Question.
Well, you testified that there can be certain errors in testing. That's something that we see throughout all different types of sort of scientific literature, which includes ethanol testing.
Yep.
And there are certain sort of factors that could cause a higher level of NADH that might not necessarily be picked up by the machines that you use at the hospital. Is that correct?
I am not familiar. I mean, if there is, it's not not a common phenomenon. Our methodology for doing many tests are based on this NADH enzyme methodology, and we've never had issues with it. I read a lot. I haven't read about major faults of our methodology for testing. Most hospitals, when we look at when we actually have to do proficiency testing with any test that we do in a hospital. So 3 times a year we get sent unknown levels of alcohol and 5 samples to be accurate 3 times a year, and we're able to look at not only our results, make sure they're correct, but we're able to look at how what other hospitals are doing across the nation. So when I last looked, and it's held true for over 10 years.
Molly, we're not there yet.
Of the, I think, 5,000 hospitals
Next witness,
that are
I think.
testing for alcohol. 80, it's over 80% of them are using our methodology, which is the NA alcohol dehydrogenase and NADH. And I can't imagine if why if there were any major issues with alcohol testing using that methodology.
Sir, you know so much, but I am struggling.
As you testified, the goal in a clinical setting, obviously, is to test for the presence of alcohol.
Right.
But you're not in the business of trying to sort of calculate BAC, correct?
Right.
No, we don't. We don't.
So
Right.
your goals are to make sure that you're screening for the presence of alcohol, but you're not quite as concerned with the precise amount that you might see in, for instance,
That's a
whole
fair
blood
question.
test in a forensic
And
lab.
that's true. Correct.
Well, we result in terms of
Her using the word precise is triggering his doctor pathologist brain, because he's like, no, we want to be precise, but we're not trying to be precise. We're trying to be precise for medical treatment, which means if we err up a little bit, we will err on the level of being higher, because that serves the purpose while still being precise, versus legal BAC that is for a different purpose. So he's taking issues with the word precise, and she's trying to make the point to the jury that this is medical, not legal.
in the serum. We know the Massachusetts laws.
Thomas,
and
this is going to be the
laws
problem.
Across the nation are based on
This is
on whole
Thomas.
blood,
This is going to be a
but
huge problem.
There are in the literature formulas that you can use if it were a medical legal case that one can use to convert our level to
Right.
a blood alcohol. We don't do it in a hospital. We won't report a serum alcohol, and then we don't do the conversion. But because it's a very rare event that that a level will end up in court. But there are forensic lab people that can
do the
provide
conversion.
that formula.
And when you get a test result from a serum test, that information does not establish when alcohol was consumed, correct?
Correct.
And so you're just looking at a specific point in time to say this is what the serum test reflects at 9:08 a.m. on January 29th.
Correct.
Yes,
Thank you.
that's it. That should be it.
All right.
9:08
Any
a.m.
follow-up?
Just briefly. As far as the interferences or anything that would lead to elevated levels from your review of Ms. Reed's chart, was there anything like that present there?
Good follow-up.
I didn't see anything. No.
Good
And the
follow-up,
interferences
Lally.
would be accounted for in the sense of the machine would sort of vet them out and not result or not recorded in the chart if that were to occur. Is that correct?
Objection, Your Honor.
The form of the question, I'll sustain the objection.
Those are good. This is Lally's best follow-up so
Dr.
far, I
Fowler,
think.
with regard to the interferences that you were talking about, what, if any, impact would that have on the results being reported?
If there were the three major things that could interfere with the result, like high lipids, hemolysis, or high bilirubin, our machine would flag that, and we would have some information that a result may not be valid. And sometimes we will report a result with a disclaimer, or sometimes if those levels are so high, we won't report it at all. But in this case, there were no flags.
Okay,
Nothing further on.
great.
Anything, Ms. Little, or are you all set?
If I could have one moment, Your Honor.
The core of this witness's testimony is that the hospital tests blood plasma for a blood alcohol level, and Karen Reed's blood alcohol level when her blood draw was done at 9:08 a.m. was 93 milligrams per milliliter. I think I got that part right. They're going to bring in another witness who is going to convert that into a BAC and then try to retrograde extrapolate that to the BAC at the time of driving. I know the question is going to be, but everybody else was also driving under the influence that night. Yes,
I'm sorry. I gave it
she is the only one that was
I'm
charged.
sorry. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, Your Honor, the Commonwealth call Mr. Nicholas Roberts to the stand. Your Honor, may we approach this while the witness is coming in?
Yes.
Nicholas Roberts is the next witness. We're going to zoom. And I've seen a number of you talking about the health of the defendant. The only thing in evidence at this point is that the defendant has MS. If there are other health conditions that this defendant has, they are not in evidence in this trial at this point. It doesn't mean they won't, but the questions from the defense attorney were very pointed about, I think, the MS, which is going to get to them attacking the milligram per deciliter. Thank you. Going to get to them attacking the BAC.
Keep your voice up really loud. If you're
So.
too soft, we have to turn off the air conditioning. Everyone's going to get mad at you.
That's so fucking stressful. The bailiff is like, you're going to have to keep your voice up because if you're too soft, we're going to have to turn off the fans and everyone's going to get mad at you. Like the way that would make some people want to vomit. Just, that's so stressful. Ruby Ray, that's not in this court, so I don't know if that is true or not.
Thank you. You can have a seat. I just need you to keep your voice up really loud. If you're too soft, we have to turn off the air conditioning. Everyone's going to get mad at you.
No problem.
How many of you in the chat, if somebody said, if you don't keep your voice up, you're going to have to turn off the AC and everyone's going to get mad at you, would want to run away? Like fucking flee.
All right, Mr. Lally.
Thank you, Your Honor.
So
Good afternoon,
harsh.
sir.
Good afternoon.
Would you please state your name and spell your last name for the jury, sir?
Sure, my name is Nicholas Roberts, Roberts.
Hello,
And,
Nick.
What is it that you do for work, sir?
I'm currently employed with a company called Thermo Fisher as a field service engineer
And how long have you been doing that?
since November of last year.
And so prior to that, or prior to November of last year, 2023, where did you work before that?
I was in the Massachusetts State Police Crime Lab in the Toxicology unit
And how long did you work in the toxicology unit at the Massachusetts State Police Crime Lab?
since October of 2014.
Now, if I could turn your attention to prior to joining the lab for the Massachusetts State Police, can you talk a little bit about your educational background? Where did you go to school and what did you go to school for?
Sure. I have a bachelor's degree in applied forensic science with a concentration in chemistry and toxicology from Mercyhurst University. That's in Erie, Pennsylvania. And then I also have a master's degree in forensic toxicology from the University of Glasgow in Scotland.
Now, after
Awesome.
receiving your degree from the University of Glasgow in Scotland, where did you go from there?
Scotland
I
was on-
returned home to the British Virgin Islands where I taught at a community college.
Sir, the way I love the British Virgin Islands. Sir. So cool. All right, sorry. I'm going to stop hearkening back to how much I love the British Virgin Islands, but I will slow him down as we get into the core of his testimony. I think he's the one doing the retrograde extrapolation, but I'm glad we went through his background training and experience because I'm just fascinated.
And what did you teach?
I'm
in
delighted by
chemistry
this.
And a term or two of physics.
And then following your
I teach
teaching in
chemistry and
Virgin
physics,
Islands, where did you
sir.
go from
I was hired then at a Mass State Police Crime Lab.
there? Now, when you were initially hired at the Mass State
Sir, Sir, I've been to Massachusetts and to the British Virgin Islands. Sir, why? Just why? Because, okay. Oh, I'm gonna go for work experience, but it's cold in Massachusetts, sir. There were wonderful women on my college water polo team at UMass Amherst who were from Puerto Rico, and I would look at them regularly and be like, do we have regrets yet? Me from Southern California, others on my team from Southern California. In the winter, we would just be like, what is happening?
Police Crime Lab, you're working initially as a forensic scientist 1, is that correct?
Correct.
And can you explain to the jury sort of what your duties and responsibilities are, what your work looks like as a forensic scientist 1?
So a forensic scientist, when you're essentially going through all the trainings that they provide.
Sir, you're
at the
so
lab.
ready to testify. We just
do a number
appreciate
of different
you.
testing, mainly on blood and urine, looking for the presence of drugs and alcohol. We also do serum conversions and retrogrades. So during your training period, I started as a FS1, so that went up until I was fully signed off to actually write reports.
I
that would
co-sign
be
the chat's
issued
love.
to ADAs across the whole of Massachusetts, in which I became a forensic scientist too.
And so what are the difference, sir, between sort of your work as a forensic scientist 1 versus your work as a forensic scientist 2?
So essentially, as a 2, you're essentially fully trained and you're able to do all the testing that we do in-house. You also are able to go and give testimony based on the reports that you write, whereas in a forensic scientist 1, you're still in that training process.
And did you work essentially as a forensic scientist 2 from that point in time till the time that you left the lab in November of 23?
Yes.
Now, with reference to while you were working at the lab, was there sort of an ongoing continuing educational component?
Yeah, so we would habitually receive articles based on different discoveries within the forensic field. So different ways they would find certain types of drugs in different bodily fluids. It's always a revolving door when it comes to drugs being discovered as well as being manufactured.
I mean, that's
what's
fair.
illicit on the street, et cetera, et cetera. We would often get different articles, just research papers based on what they're doing to discover these things within the matrices that we are looking at.
Now, in addition to that, while you worked at the lab,
completely fair.
Are you familiar with
I imagine it's like whack-a-mole trying to keep up with
What, if any,
lab tests for new
proficiency testing did you
things.
undergo while you were at the lab?
So we receive both in-house and
This is witness
external proficiency
47.
tests. Essentially, the process would be just the same. The only difference would be we'd have internal people sending us samples as if it came from an external source. And then the external proficiency testing that we receive is actually part of our accreditation. So it came in just like regular samples, and we would test it accordingly per our protocols.
Don't worry, Chad.
As
I
far
will
as the
slow him
proficiency
down as we
testing
get to the
is
heart of his
concerned, of course, from
testimony,
time to lab
so we can
capacities
all
goes
be
down.
delighted by
Yes.
his
Now,
accent
you
as
mentioned
well.
a little bit as far as accreditation with regard to the lab. What, if any, accreditation did the State Police Crime Lab have?
We had accreditation. It's a
Oh, yellow pill, that's
internationally
just a
accreditation
fact.
board for forensics scientists, as well as any kind of lab in particular, and the branch that our lab would fall under. We have a certain set of rules that we have to adhere to. Mainly, it's a standard known as an ISO 17025, but we have a different accreditation board, and they have narrower requirements because of the type of lab that we are.
Because they're a crime lab.
It may be pretty well understood, but that as far as the accreditation is concerned, that's done through an external entity. Is that correct?
Yes.
So for all of you asking, why don't we zoom through the experts? We are at 1.25. I really want to
With
make sure we
regard
capture
to
all the
lab,
testimony
as far as your assignment of work,
in the trial and have
what
it
time
on the
did you left
channel.
lab? About how many forensic
So,
scientists were
I've got him at
working
1.25.
in the lab in your toxicology?
So
By the
we are
time that I left?
zooming as much as we can.
So within the toxicology unit, there was one more when at the time that I left.
And as far as you and sort of the other forensic scientists too, at the time that you worked at the lab, was there some sort of rotation, or how were you assigned work as it related to your work in the toxicology?
So throughout my time there, we had more forensic scientists, 1s and 2s.
Lally, how he is assigned work is so irrelevant. He's lovely. We love to hear him talk, but can't we just go, you're a scientist too? Were you assigned a case with number this? Don't worry, we'll slow him down in a little bit because we don't need to know how he's regularly assigned work. It just needs to be, were you assigned this case number? That's the question, Lally.
Time, is that correct?
Yes.
Were you assigned to serum?
Unless you're going to ask him more about Scotland, and then I'll listen all day long. I mean, the jury might get annoyed, but I'd listen to it.
Conversions at that particular time?
I was, yes.
He was assigned to
At
do
some point, were
serum
you,
conversions.
Specifically assigned to a case involving a Ms. Karen Reed.
Yes.
Now, as far as a serum conversion is
We're going to go back to
concerned,
normal speed.
if you could explain to the jury sort of what goes into that process and what is it that you're reviewing or you're looking at, how is a serum conversion, what is it, and how
Oh my God, Lally, that's the most
Sure.
compound shit I've ever heard.
So with serum conversions, usually what happens is that we get hospital results. So that would be the police or the ADAs would get results from the hospitals that whoever was attended to. We get the results, and usually hospital alcohol results they use serum in order to test alcohol. Serum is essentially the liquid portion of blood. Let's say, for instance, you fall and you cut yourself, that red stuff that comes out, that has serum within it. What the hospital does, they centrifuge it or spin it very fast in order to get the red blood cells, the white blood cells, and all kinds of the heavier materials out of that blood. And what's left is a serum. So they use that to test their alcohol.
He's just so easy to
What
listen to and
studies have
understand. I
shown is
really
that
like him a lot.
we actually tend to have a higher alcohol concentration in serum than in blood. So what that means is that due to the chemical nature of alcohol, it likes to stay in that liquid portion more than in
Sir, the
throughout the
chat-
whole blood. So a serum conversion essentially is
Your
able to
degrees in
convert
chemistry and like physics
the
aside, sir, if you ever want to
alcohol
start
content
reading
from,
books
that serum that we get from the
for
hospital
Audible,
into what it would be in whole blood.
we're here for a second career.
Did you have occasion to perform a serum conversion in regard to Ms.
He talked
Reed's,
about being a professor.
medical
Yep.
records?
Yes.
May I approach the witness?
He was probably a very popular professor, especially in teaching physics, because I would imagine he was easy to understand, where some professors, especially in the more technical fields, can be real difficult to follow because they can be too high level. He's great. Chat, you're the
Do
best.
you recognize that, sir?
Yes.
And what do you recognize that to be?
So this is
You guys
the
are
serum conversion report that I made, with the calculations were made on May 3rd of 2022.
And as far as the result that you received, in addition, so what kind of materials did you receive in order to perform that analysis?
We got the
Sir, under this file number, what did you receive? This. What did you do? This. That's it, Lally. Just simple questions, man. This is a great witness.
medical
Let him do the
records.
talking.
May I approach the witness again?
Yes.
He received a vial
My apologies, Your Honor.
or a report. We're zooming through Lally's stacks of whatever he's stacking.
Is that a portion of the medical records that you reviewed in regard to Ms. Reed's serum alcohol level?
For those of you asking, wait,
Yes.
where'd it go?
And
lost.
If you could, what was reported in the medical?
Drop Dead Fred, because they're going to be talking about scientific data that we need. Drop Dead Fred. It was the guy from Real Forge, not Fake Forge. It was Forge Daddy was the one who were like, sir, can you read to us? We're suckers for a great voice.
Records that you reviewed and using in your serum conversion analysis as far as the level?
The level was at 93 milligrams per deciliter.
He received the hospital report.
With regard to that 93 milligrams per deciliter, I'm sorry, was there also a time that specimen was collected as far as your review of those records?
Yes.
And what was that time, sir?
It was at 9 in the morning, 9:08.
908
Now, as
is the
far
draw.
as,
That's
in terms of
important.
the general term as far as forensic science, what you did at the lab. Can you explain what that term means or what you did in relation to that?
Oh my God, Lally, that's so compound. Ask him
What do you
one
mean
question.
specifically?
What do you mean specifically? Lally, how many witnesses have to say, what are you doing for you to ask them easier questions? Simple is better.
Very poorly phrased. Let me try to restate that a bit. What is your understanding of forensic science? Can you explain that?
Oh, forensic science.
What is forensic science?
It's
Sir, I love you, but
on any analysis or essentially that's what.
That of forensic science?
Yes.
Toxicology.
So toxicology in general is essentially just a study of poisons.
Great.
Body is environmental.
Toxicology.
Things.
Difference between a serum plasma level
Okay, good.
versus a whole blood level?
Yes.
And can you explain to the jury sort of what your understanding is of each and what, if any, differences?
Okay, I
are?
thought we were going to get into the actual retrograde extrapolation because Lally was asking those questions, and then he jumped backwards into shit we don't need. So I'm speeding him back up.
Just plainly, your serum plasma level or the serum plasma is what it's called. It could be referred to as either or one or the other. So that is just the alcohol level in your serum, whereas your whole blood is your alcohol content or regular BAC in the whole blood. This difference between the two is, like I said previously, in your serum or plasma, that alcohol content would be higher as it would have been in the whole blood.
Great.
Now, as far as the milligrams per deciliter, how that's reported in the Good Samaritan medical records referencing Ms. Reed that you reviewed in this case, is that typical as far as how hospitals would report sort of the serum plasma
I
level?
don't think you need to
Yeah,
ask
from
that
my experience
question.
and all the times that I've seen serum conversions come to the lab, milligram per deciliters are the units that they use from the hospital. Yeah.
Now, as far as that 93 milligrams per deciliter, what, if anything, with regard to serum conversion, what, if anything, are you then able to do to convert that to a BAC or a blood alcohol concentration?
So
How do you
based on some
convert
studies,
it?
they came up with a few different conversion factors, knowing that the
That's all.
blood alcohol content would be higher than the serum plasma content. They're able to apply different conversion factors to the numbers that we would get in serum. And we usually get, excuse me, we usually give a low, an average, and a high, being that it's kind of hard to say what one particular person's conversion factor would be between the two of them, since it's dependent upon like age,
A
sex, the water
person.
content, what you had to eat that day. So it's harder to pinpoint. Therefore, we give a good range as what it could possibly be pertaining just in case a person
Right.
converts or their
alcohol
conversion would be a lot lower or higher.
differently.
So we give a good range.
And as far as those different conversion factors, where do those come from?
It's based on some studies. I don't remember the actual names of the papers that were thing, but they were based on studies throughout the forensic world when it comes to looking at specifically testing blood and serum to find that conversion factor.
And as far as those studies
Have any of you guys gone and done the law enforcement testing when they are training and testing BAC, where you go in a room and they control the amount of drinks? Some people get hard liquor, some people get wine, some people get beer. They measure out the amount you're drinking over time, and then they do breathalyzers and they do the different types of testing. I kept thinking, I will go do this one of these days, and never got to do it, but I'm sure some of you have done it. It's an interesting thing. I've had friends that have done it where they're like me, that in the room trying to do field sobriety tests for training. But anyway, we'll keep going.
Come from sort of different.
It's not a story time day, Emily. We have to zoom.
Correct.
Yeah, so that's how they were able to get the range of conversion factors that they use.
Now, as far as the
Lolly, you're
water
sped up.
in the serum, or sort of how that
I didn't mean to
works
do a
essentially,
dirty
what,
pause.
if any, relationship does that have to the reading that you get or the conversion factors that you use?
So the water content, essentially, if the serum being the liquid portion of the blood, water is also liquid. It makes up some of that serum that you get from it. Therefore, your higher water content, more essentially, the lower the concentration could be of that, or lower or higher, depending upon whether or not your water content in that sample is lower or higher.
So as far as those different,
They normally
conversion
Uber
factors
people
that you
back home.
use, this is essentially a mathematical calculation. Is that right?
Yes.
And so the different conversion factors that you're using for the low, the average, and the high, what are those conversion factors?
So the low is a 1.18, with the average being a 1.14, and then the high being a 1.12.
So based on your analysis, as far as the medical records and what was reported to you, using those three conversion factors, what, if anything, did you come up with as far as the low and average and high for the 93 milligrams per deciliter?
All right. So this is going to be the BAC at 9:08 in the morning for Karen Reed, or this is their BAC for 9:08 in the morning for Karen Reed.
So our values that were calculated for the low was a 0.078 gram percent. The high was a 0.083 gram percent, with the average being a 0.081.
Now, sir, with reference to the alcohol that's reported in the records,
So what he's saying is
familiar with
at
the
9:08 in the morning, Karen Reed was between a 0.078 and a 0.083, with the average being a 0.081. Remember, they are not trying to charge her with DUI for 9:08 in the morning. They are trying to charge her, well, they've charged her. They're trying to convict her of driving under the influence causing death from like 12:30 the night before.
of alcohol?
Yes.
And can you explain sort of what those types are and what the differences are or where they come from?
Sure.
I love that he's like,
the different,
sure, sir.
Multiple different types of alcohol, mainly based on the number of carbons that are within that molecule. You start off with methanol, which is one carbon. Methanol you can find in like some rubbing alcohols.
He's like, let's talk
You can
chemistry.
find them in many different labs. You have big, large vials of them. Ethanol, which has two carbons. That one is the common one that is in our alcoholic beverages, and it goes all the way up isopropanol, octanol, etc. It all depends on the number of carbons in the chain of it.
And the type that's reported within Ms. Reed's medical records, that was ethanol, correct?
Correct.
And so, with regard to your training experience as a forensic toxicologist,
sir.
you're familiar with the term known as a central nervous system depressant?
Yes.
We're speeding you back up while we talk about what
that
alcohol
term
does to
means
people.
and how it relates to alcohol.
Sure. So alcohol is what is classified as a central nervous system depressant, and essentially the name kinds of
What alcohol is. They're getting into this because of the DUI, that alcohol can slow down your reflexes and your decision making and all the rest of the things. That's why they are getting into
system is
this.
responsible for all of that.
I sped
with the
it back up.
depressant introduced into the body,
Do we need it?
It affects that central nervous system.
We don't.
Causing
The jury
things to
does.
slow down. So that's essentially what depressant means. It's going to slow down certain processes that a central nervous system would be in charge of. So you can have.
So, okay, central nervous system depressant. Some of you have asked me about the Java sock that is on my coffee. I appreciate all of you. A number of law nerds have sent this to me so my cold brew wouldn't drip, and so you don't have to look at it while I am drinking it, clinging to the walls of the cup. So I appreciate you guys. So
Or
that's what it is.
side effects from having a central nervous system depressant in the body: lethargy, sleepiness, drowsiness, unable to walk properly, any kind of.
He's explaining what
Any one of
being
those
drunk
tests that you
is.
see on TV from the police when they try to get your horizontal gaze and they try to make sure you're coordinated, it can affect all those things.
Now, sir, are you also familiar through your training experience of working in forensic toxicology with a term known as retrograde extrapolation?
Yep.
And can you explain to the jury what you understand that term to be?
So a retrograde extrapolation is essentially another calculation, but it allows you to be able to calculate what the possible blood alcohol content would have been
This
at a
matters.
time prior to when the blood was drawn. Say, for instance, blood was drawn at 2, you could essentially figure out what the blood alcohol content would have been at 10 in the morning prior to it.
This
That's
is
done with
something
calculation as well,
that is
correct?
not well settled scientifically, and I'm sure we're going to hear more fighting about retrograde extrapolation from the
Know or that you
defense.
would want to know in order to perform a retrograde extrapolation.
We'd need to know, one, for sure, what the alcohol content would have been. We
And when somebody stopped drinking.
also need to know the time that the blood was drawn, as well as the time of the last alcohol consumption.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in regard to timing, as far as what, if
Huge
any,
part of it.
limitations are there in regard to performing retrograde extrapolation as it pertains to timing?
Huge part of it.
So when we do these calculations, anything that's shorter than 2 hours, we usually don't do that conversion.
And why is that, sir?
Because we're built in within our calculations, we allow for 2 hours. That has to do with the way that alcohol leaves the body. If the alcohol is still being absorbed by the body, we want to give it enough time to get to a point where it's coming out of the body as opposed to increasing in the body. So that 2
Not
hours
rising.
puts the person at a point in which that alcohol will be coming out as opposed to it being absorbed.
So there are essentially 3 different sort of phases as far as intake of the alcohol into the body through
Rising blood
dissipation.
alcohol.
Yeah,
falling
we have
blood
usually
alcohol.
there's a well-known kind of metabolism route to which they alcohol metabolizes out of the body. Yes.
And so can you describe to the jury sort of that metabolism process as far as how it starts to its end?
We are
Sure.
sped up.
So with
Jack.
having, let's say, 1 drink, what the body begins to do at that point is absorb the alcohol. Usually you get like a steady line that increases with time. So if you think of a regular chart where you have the level of alcohol in the body versus time, which would be on the y-axis or the x-axis at the bottom, as time goes along, after your first drink, the body starts to absorb the alcohol. If that was your only drink and that was it, the body then at a certain point it stops absorbing it because there's no more to absorb, and it plateaus. So essentially the line goes straight. After that point, the body starts to eliminate it at this point. And then your level or your concentration of alcohol within the body decreases with time as it's getting rid of it.
And so there's sort of the absorption phase, the plateau, and then the elimination phase. Is that correct?
Yes.
Now, you mentioned that in the course of your analysis,
There's a
retrograde
lot of
extrapolation,
factors that can mess this
it's important
up.
to know sort of when the last drink was. Is that right?
Yes.
And why is that?
That way we can get a good time in and figure out
The last drink is critical.
the amount of time that has passed between the last drink as well as the time.
If the time of the last drink is wrong, this entire everything he's going to say goes out the window. But he also knows that.
that
So,
the blood was taken.
Now, did you perform a retrograde extrapolation analysis with regard to Ms. Reed's BAC or the converted BAC from the serum?
I'm slowing this back down.
I did.
And so with reference to Ms. Reed, as far as you looked at obviously the hospital records, you looked at the serum conversion report. What, if anything else, did you review or look at?
What else did you look at?
Extrapolation analysis.
We usually get a police incident report, and that usually identifies the time in which, per their narrative, what time in which they had the last drink.
Right, because they're normally, by the time he normally gets it, they're normally investigating a DUI, which wasn't happening here.
If you could just look at that and look up and finish.
Great extrapolation report that I did for the subject of Karen Reed.
Now, with respect to the time that you utilized in that report, as far as when was the time that you utilized as far as the last drink or time of operation?
The time that was utilized as the last drink, it was at 12:45.
Huh.
12:45 a.m., is that correct?
Correct.
And so you're using that to sort of extrapolate from 9:08 a.m. when the 93 milligram per deciliter is reported from good.
Here's the problem I have with that. They all left the waterfall before 12:17. So pinning the last drink at 12:45 already seems off to me, but I guess erring on the side of the last drink being later, not sooner, is okay. Gwendolyn, don't worry about it. It's in my Amazon shop and we can talk about it later. I am not sponsored. It's a Remarkable 2. There's a couple other e-ink choices. I picked this one because it's lightweight.
It's marinated to 12:45 a.m., correct?
And I like the feel of the...
Now, with regard to that 12:45 a.m., what, if any, difference would it make if it were a little bit off of that? Say it was 12:30 a.m. or it was 1 or 1:10 a.m. What, if any, impact would that have on your conversion?
So we tend to go by hours. So we kind of round to the nearest, I think, 15-minute interval. So a couple minutes or 10 to 20 minutes forward or behind of that 12:45.
Doesn't matter.
It wouldn't change the results by a lot.
That's good to know.
If any.
And similar to the serum conversion, is this done with different conversion factors as far as a
it's going to be a big problem if she went...
so we usually just calculate a minimum and a
home and
maximum
drank.
For the retrograde.
While waiting for John
and
O'Keefe
that
to come home.
incorporates some conversions as well.
The state kind of has to prove she
the
didn't.
minimum versus the maximum, what of each of those sort of signify, or how do you come to those mathematical calculations?
So with the minimum calculation, we incorporate the 2-hour period. So we assume that maybe that 12:45 wasn't, the body wasn't at that point finished with the elimination. It wasn't in the elimination phase, so we allow it for 2 hours ahead of it. We also have a conversion factor. Once again, this is a study that was done to see the elimination rate.
I'm holding on to a lot of your questions
within a population.
Chad, I see them. We'll get to them.
What rate they would get alcohol out of their system.
I'm going to speed him
per
back
hour.
up till we get
So
to
we
the
applied
results.
the lower limit, which was a 0.1.
Damn it, Emily. I'm going to speed him up till we get to the results. Here are the results.
What rate they would get alcohol out of their
the
system
timing was so perfect.
per hour. So we implied the lower limit, which was a 0.1 gram percent per hour, with that
that's
2-hour allotted
what their
time
their
interval.
assumptions.
And then we used the lower serum conversion number, the one that was converted on the lower end. We use all of that in the calculation in order to come up with the minimum. The maximum one uses the opposite. So it uses the higher converted serum conversion number with the higher elimination rate, using the full amount of time.
And these calculations or these conversion factors are all based on sort of medical studies that you reviewed in literature that goes into your training?
Yeah, all of
Perfect.
it was part of the training, and they came up with those numbers prior to even when I was hired there. But it is based on multiple different
Correlation
studies. In that, looking at that elimination rate.
Right.
And so from your calculations when it came to the minimum with regard to the retrograde extrapolation, what if any calculation, what if any result did you
Oh.
from with your calculations as it pertains to the minimum?
So the minimum amount that was calculated would have been a 0.135 gram percent.
And that's essentially reporting in a blood alcohol concentration, is that correct?
Correct.
And then with regard to the maximum, what if any result did you get from your mathematical calculations in regard to that?
The result was a 0.292 gram percent.
That's high.
And so that range that you received is a bit of a wide range. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
And why is that?
So we base those calculations. They're based on that conversion that I did from the hospital results from serum, giving us a good range of values in the
sped it
first
back
place.
up?
But then we incorporate the retrograde extrapolation one, which uses a time factor, and that 2 hour difference using two different elimination rates that causes a wider span of values. And it's just so that it can encompass essentially anybody within the general population, that they would be somewhere in between that lower limit and that upper limit.
So essentially, from those mathematical calculations, anyone within sort of the general population with that result
Would fall
be
within
somewhere
there.
between the 0.13 and the 0.29, correct?
Correct.
May I approach this retrieve yard?
Yes. Okay.
Lally I was going to say should be almost done, and now we're getting to cross-examination. Again, the retrograde extrapolation is going to be,
Afternoon.
Good
I
afternoon.
imagine, hotly
You
contested.
used a method called retrograde extrapolation to reach your sort of opinions and conclusions in this case, correct?
Yeah, it was a calculation.
And that means that you rely on an assumption that a trend will continue beyond sort of observable data.
So the metabolism is actually pretty well studied. So we know that that elimination rate, unless you introduce more alcohol into the system, it declines at that rate, and it's pretty linear.
Exactly. So in other words, certain assumptions are incredibly important for you to reach your analysis.
Sure.
And that includes sort of the timing of the very last drink that the individual had.
Yep.
Right?
Yes.
If your drinking pattern is sort of different than what you assume for purposes of your calculation, then you'd agree that your entire extrapolation would be incorrect. Is that right?
Yes, it could be.
Yeah, he's like, we can only
Those assumptions sort of included
do what we
the
can
time of
do.
the incident, right?
Yes.
And importantly, the time of the last drink.
So those two will be what we use.
That was
It's the time of the
reported.
blood draw, as well as the time of the incident or last drink.
And your report acknowledges that the testing that was used to obtain ethanol results in this case was not performed by the Massachusetts State Police Crime Lab.
Correct.
And for that reason, the report and those results do not fall under your forensic lab accreditation standards.
Correct.
The Massachusetts State Police, as you testified, is an accredited forensic lab.
Yes.
Not a
And so you're
hospital.
required to meet certain minimum standards in order to uphold that.
Yes.
And you'd agree that those accreditation standards are different from accreditation standards that, say, a hospital lab might have.
They can be.
Cheryl asked, did she have a drink at home? The state, the Commonwealth has to prove that
You
she
ever work on
didn't. We don't know if she did. Could she have? Yes. They have to prove that she didn't. They're assuming when she dropped John O'Keefe off at 34 Fairview, she went back to John O'Keefe's place and went to bed. Could she have gone back and had another glass of wine or two or a White Claw or whatever? Or they, got in an argument and she got pissed and went home and had 2 shots of vodka and went to bed. Could have been, but we have some testimony that Karen was not going to stay in Canton. So the state's going to have to argue she wasn't even planning on staying in Canton. She was waiting for John O'Keefe to come home, and then she was going to drive back to her place in Mansfield, I think. But that doesn't even make any sense with the blizzard of the century apparently coming. So they're going to have to argue that she didn't have anything else to drink. But the defense is going to argue you don't know that. So it's going to make it hard because, again, when the jury has to determine a fact, if there are 2 reasonable explanations, the jury instructions are going to say you have to take the one that points towards not guilty. The language sometimes varies by jurisdictions. Points towards not guilty, points towards innocence. But there's a lot else here, including potential medications, potentially drinking when she got home. We don't know what she did. All we have is that at the hospital at 9:08, they drew her blood, not because anyone said this woman seems drunk, but because at the time at the hospital, they were drawing it for medical treatment. But that proves that at the time she was at the hospital at 9 o'clock in the morning, she was potentially above, or at least right on the bubble of the legal limit. But she's not being charged with drunk driving in the morning. She's being charged with drunk driving causing death at 12:30, 12:45 the night before. So this is going to be hotly contested going forward.
Testing within the Massachusetts State Police Lab for serum tests or whole blood tests?
So we did test the blood and serum for alcohol content at the Massachusetts State Police Crime Lab, yes.
And their typical protocols are to use whole blood tests.
We use whole blood or serum.
In terms of the machinery that's used with the Massachusetts State Police Crime Lab, you'd agree that the gold standard is gas chromatography and mass spectrometry machines.
Usually with a headspace detector.
I'll let him, go ahead, you can
Sorry.
answer that.
Usually with a headspace detector, yes.
And that would detect
This
whole
is
blood
my
methods.
headspace.
No, it just detects any volatile substance.
But you'd agree that a serum test, usually, as you testified, has a much higher level than whole blood.
Yeah, due to the nature of the substance itself.
And so you kind of have to go through this extra step of trying to extrapolate, okay, how do I convert this to get to whole blood?
So what we incorporated anytime we had
Am I
a blood,
still sped up?
a serum sample submitted to the lab for alcohol testing, we
Also,
actually did the same
again-
serum conversion in order to figure out what the blood alcohol concentration would have been.
This witness
And that's an extra step that you
of neutral scientific witnesses, this is the type of testimony I would expect. This witness is just answering the questions, listening to them. And when she said, you use this machine and this machine, he goes, well, we also use this. Not defensive, not combative, just answering what is asked. This is what I would expect from all expert witnesses. And I very much like
have to take
his
using
testimony.
conversion factors, correct?
the
Yep,
way
that's a
he is
calculation.
You're not
testifying.
actually testing for ethanol in the blood. You're testing
It just
for
is what it is.
an ADH, and then you have to do a conversion to get it.
He's
to
like, I do what I
blood
do.
test, which is
It is what it is.
Yeah, so we get the serum level and then we convert it via calculation.
That's it.
And typically in the Massachusetts State Police Crime Lab, you would do what's called confirmatory testing.
Yeah, so we have a screening method as well as a
And
confirmatory
the
test.
hospital
correct.
doesn't do that.
And confirmatory testing means that you take two separate samples and you test both of those.
Essentially, well, our protocol involved testing in duplicate, but that's not always the case for the other drugs that we tested. We essentially have a screening test, which is one type of test, and then the confirmatory test would be a separate test, or sometimes even the same test, just we run the sample again.
And the reason you typically would do
He's
two
just making
tests
sure
is
it's
to
clear.
that there's no error in the testimony.
Correct.
And that acts as a fail-safe against false positives. You agree
Yes.
with that? And
Yeah, he's just like,
it
it's
also
just
ensures
this.
that you're testing the correct sample.
Very neutral.
Correct.
Aaron, we're doing the afternoon of day 18 because
In this case,
I
obviously,
didn't
you
cover it
conduct any of the testing.
when it
Correct.
happened.
You're just assuming the accuracy
And we
of
had a
a
break
single test
today.
that was performed by a hospital.
Actually,
I'll allow it.
yeah.
And so if the clinical
We're
results
sweeping.
are invalid, then your extrapolation is going to be invalid.
Yes.
Right. He's like, if they send me garbage, there's nothing I can do
Now,
with it.
You discussed a lot about sort of serum testing and conversion rates. Do you recall that testimony?
Yeah.
And you'd agree that the precise conversion rate between serum ethanol levels and whole blood ethanol levels is almost impossible to accurately predict.
For each individual person, it would be difficult. Yes.
And
That's why there's
because
a
the amount
range.
of water in our blood
Do you know what I really like about him? Is he looks pleased with how clear the questions are. Doesn't he? He's like, yes, I understand that. Yes, that makes sense. He looks pleased with the conciseness of the questioning.
is scientifically impossible to predict with accuracy.
I'm not aware of any kind of test that would do that. So yeah.
Because individuals are different, right?
Yes.
And so the conversions that you use are based on
Yes,
averages. from
metabolisms are
scientific
different.
studies.
People are
Yes.
different.
But you'd agree that in
Bodies
certain
are funny.
instances, people can fall outside of that average range.
Yeah.
In fact,
And they're going to argue, I would imagine,
comparison
about the
of,
MS.
hospital serum alcohol levels, they range quite wildly. You agree with that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
In fact, you're aware that some studies show that a conversion rate from serum alcohol to blood alcohol can be as high as 1.59%.
I wasn't aware of those numbers, but yeah, it could
Karen,
range. That's why we
they're
give a wide
going
range,
to,
and you could lie on the outskirts of either side.
the DUI,
And so
because
that
she's
would
charged
mean
with a
that
DUI
the
causing death.
actual blood alcohol content, once it's goes through the conversion rate, would be much, much lower than sort of the average conversion rate that you relied on.
Yeah, it could be both higher and lower.
And that includes that range that you gave, right?
Yeah, it could fall outside the range.
Right. Sometimes there are people that fall outside of the range. And we know that this is an issue across medical testing
You'd agree
as a
that
whole
more
in the field of
imprecise
medicine, is that
extrapolation-
those average ranges don't account for everybody. There are plenty of people that fall outside the average ranges, higher or lower. So he's saying, yes, with this, people can fall outside the average ranges. They are averages, and those averages are based on assumptions. Those tests are not always widely diverse in the people that they are meaning the averages around. And so, yes, it can happen. And somebody who has a complicated medical history or is on medication or whatever can fall outside those averages, but it gives them room for the defense to argue.
is.
And he's
So
very
that's how
clear.
valuable it is.
Yeah, you do have to base it on good. Your starting blocks have to be good. So you have to know the times in which the blood was drawn, the time of the incident,
Right.
and essentially what your value was for your BAC.
And the time of the last drink, you'd want to know that?
So we would put that around the time, either the time of the last drink or the incident date.
And so the more sort of unknowns you're trying to account for, you'd agree the less reliable your end result is going to be.
It could be, yes.
And you'd agree that sort of the range you gave in this case, which was 0.135 to 0.292, that's a very, very large disparity.
Yeah,
High end, low end.
Almost a sort of 120% swing.
yeah.
That would be the equivalent of, for example, predicting a child's going to grow somewhere from 6 feet to 14 feet.
Objection.
Sustained.
Well, that's a really bad
It's
analogy,
a very
ma'am.
large number. You'd agree with that.
Yeah, there's a large range, like I said, due to the factors involved in the calculation. That's how it gets so large.
And that's because you're acting with a lot of unknowns in this case.
Yes.
Lisa Ann asked, how can they charge her with DUI causing death if we don't know what
Now, you testified that your retroactive
John
extrapolation
O'Keefe's
assumes
cause of
that
death
Ms.
is?
reached the elimination phase of processing alcohol.
we are going to know his cause of death. And the prosecution's theory, as they said in opening, is that she hit him with her car, and it was one of the factors in his death. I believe hypothermia is going to be another factor, but if she hit him and incapacitated him and then left him in the cold, that's all going to fall under that realm. They charged her with second degree, which is a volitional intentional homicide, second degree murder, DUI, Massachusetts, they call it an OUI, causing death. So the drunk driving causing death, and then a hit and run causing death. So they have three things that they have charged Karen Reed with. This is going towards whether or not they can prove that Karen Reed was intoxicated when she drove John O'Keefe to 34 Fairview.
At or before sort of 12:45 a.m.
Yeah, we allow for, we start for the maximum at the 12:45, and then it would have been 2:45 for the minimum.
And so for purposes of your calculation, if Ms. Reed drank alcohol after 12:45 a.m. and before her blood was drawn at 9:08 a.m., your entire calculation would be invalid.
Yeah.
Yeah. I imagine they have nothing further, right? If Karen Reed drank alcohol after 12:45, your entire calculation would be invalid. He's like, yeah, I need the time that they stopped drinking.
So in this instance, Mr. Roberts, you're dealing with a time of incident that was known, correct?
Yes, it was given to me that it was at 12:45.
And as far as the,
But it was given to him based on other people's assumptions. And that's going to be hard. Who made that assumption? And will the jury trust the person that made that assumption? Because they're going to trust him. There's no reason not to trust him. But is the jury going to trust the person that made the 12:45 assumption?
BAC or the serum conversion that was coming from a medical record as far as, so that was known as well at 9:08 in the morning.
The time that the blood was drawn, yeah, that was known as well.
Now, as far as the question you were just asked, if the defendant drank alcohol after 12:45, does that include sort of shortly after 12:45, or how long after 12:45 would it take in order to affect your calculations or your retrograde extrapolation?
It's hard to say where that would have skewed it. It would have definitely caused a different time frame, depending on how long after the incident or the reported last drink, if there was another drink in
Right,
between
drinking
there,
at 1 a.m., not
it'd
a big
shorten
deal.
up the amount of time that
4
would have been
a.m.,
prior
a
to
big deal.
the blood draw for sure.
What I'm asking is, would it have any significant impact, or would there be any difference if the last drink was, say, at 1 a.m. versus 5 a.m.?
Yes.
So that'd be a 4-hour difference.
It's a big difference.
So essentially that could, given the conversion rates, that would put the numbers very different. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
What I'm saying is, so the 5 a.m. would significantly impact your calculations, correct?
Yes.
The 1 a.m., would that significantly impact your calculations?
No.
Okay.
You all set, Ms. Little?
If I could just ask one question.
Lee or Lay?
12:45 is the time
Trepidant.
that you sort of.
I didn't cover the afternoon of
And
day
just wait,
18.
That was not something that was provided to you by my client, right?
No.
That was something that was provided to you from a police report.
Correct.
No further questions.
Okay.
That was very
All right,
clear and
Mr. Roberts, you are
concise.
all set, sir. Thank you very much.
We like you very much, sir. Great testimony.
Okay, your next witness, Mr. Lally?
Yes, Your Honor. The Commonwealth call Mr. Michael Trotta to the stand.
That was the most Massachusetts shit I've ever heard. Trotta. I love it. That's the most Massachusetts I've heard Lally be. This last witness, I don't know why he's not at the crime lab anymore, but it is, I think, a loss to the crime lab that he is not. So we are now getting to witness Trotta. God, I love the way he said that.
You solemnly swear the evidence you give the court and jury in the case.
We're going to keep this at 1.25.
Yes, thank you.
I like that last witness quite a lot. He's the kind of witness when you're a DA and you see his name on the
All right,
file,
Mr.
you're like,
Lally,
oh,
whenever
thank
you're ready.
God.
Good afternoon, sir. Could you please state your name and spell your last name for the jury?
Michael Trotta, Trotta.
And where do you live, sir?
Sharon, Mass.
How long have you lived in Sharon?
This will be
On
witness
Sharon since 82.
48.
And what do you do for work, sir?
I am the Superintendent of Public Works for the town of Canton
And how long have you held that position as Superintendent of Public Works?
since 2003.
And did you work for the town of Canton prior to 2003?
No.
Now, with regard to being the Superintendent of Public Works, can you describe to the jury sort of what are your duties and responsibilities when it comes to that work?
Typical management duties of staffing, controlling, directing, working on the budget.
That sounds like a
working
very
on
challenging
scheduling,
administrative
long-term
job.
scheduling, 5 to 10 years, capital planning, overall operations, the day-to-day operations, what it takes to maintain a water system, a sewer system,
Thank
a
you,
road
Miguelina.
system.
With reference,
I'm fascinated because I am a fucking nerd about what it would take to maintain like a whole massive city sewer system. Like I want to know all of it, but now is not the time. Like now is not the time, but fascinated.
to, if I could turn your attention back
Like,
to late January.
The amount of work that must go into
At
administratively
some point in early February,
directing
were
the
you
public works of a
contacted by
large city would be
Trooper
so
Garza, who
interesting.
happened to be before?
Yes.
And do you recall who that trooper was or how they contacted you?
I believe it was Michael Porter, and I believe the contact was by phone.
Now, with reference to that trooper, is that someone that you knew or you had spoken to before in any way?
No,
And prior to that day, did you know a John O'Keefe or a Karen Reed or anybody?
no.
He's like, I don't know why anyone's calling me.
As far as anybody within, and
I imagine this is going to be about the plows.
Familiar with them? Did you know them at the time?
No.
Plows fall under
Now-
public work, right?
When you were contacted in that early February of 2022, with regard to the blizzard the week before, what if anything was the trooper asking you? What kind of information were they looking for?
He wanted to know what the procedure was when we prepare and staff a snowstorm.
And if you could explain to the jury sort of what is the procedure or what at that time.
Well, I'm
what was the
interested by
procedure
this.
And what was sort of the makeup of what Canton DPW would do with regard to a snowstorm?
Well, we have the town is divided up into, I believe, 29 plow routes, several main routes, and side routes. The routes are generally somewhere between 3 miles and 3.5 miles long. And we have 30, I think back then we had 39 pieces of our own and probably 30-something private plow trucks. We try very hard to have 2 trucks on a route, but we generally don't get enough.
Interesting.
So if we try to have a town truck on a route with a private plow on a route. The private plow is procured through a bid process. They have to have a contract. They have to have insurance, liability insurance, and they have to show that they paid their taxes to the state and that they have workers' comp. And they have a contract with the town. Then the operations manager is in charge of the on-site
I think that's a good bet.
boots on the ground, if you want to call it that. He'll assign the specific truck and the private contractor to a route. Generally, the day before, maybe 12, 18 hours before, the two of us talk. We try to schedule the overtime so that you're not going home at 3 o'clock and then you're getting woken up at 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning to come back. We like to schedule it so when the guys go home, they know when they're going to come back. To the best of our ability, that's what we'll do. We'll tell the contractors
That would be very
when they are expected. And generally, if we're plowing, it starts with a sanding operation. So we would have a sanding fleet, which is maybe a dozen trucks. They'll come in early, and then the rest of the public works people come in at a scheduled time.
And so there'd be about, and correct me if I'm wrong, there'd be about 30 some odd trucks that were sort of DPW trucks?
A few more. I'm not sure the exact number. It's probably 37 or 38 because that counts sidewalk plows too. So there may be.
I live in Tennessee. We
I
have
think
like
there's
2
3 sidewalk
plows.
plows. So there's probably
One plow
34 or
route.
35.
And we all just hunker
We'll
down
say
for a
between
week.
medium-sized trucks and the big construction trucks.
They plow the main
That was
routes to
sort
the
of my next
hospital, and that's
question. As
about
far
it.
as the DPW trucks are concerned, do they vary in size, or what is sort of the range and size of the town?
They'll go from a pickup, 2-ton pickup, F-150
Andrea,
or
no, it was an
F-250 Ford, if you're
Assumption.
familiar with that, to a medium-duty 20,000 to 22,000 pound truck up to a large construction truck, which is generally 26, 28,000 pounds. The
Now,
large truck is a 6-wheel truck.
and as far as the other trucks, the private ones, those would sort of be subcontracted out through the bidding process, is that correct?
Yes.
And would the range, as far as the size of those trucks, would that be similar or something?
Oh my God.
They
Lally,
are
I don't know if we need to know the
pickup
size
trucks.
of every truck
Usually lighter
that
pickup trucks.
plows.
There may be a couple of front-end loaders. There's probably,
I'm
I don't
interested.
think we have
I don't know if
don't
the
think there's
jury
any
needs
big-
it.
heavy-duty trucks, but they're probably pickups, might be a couple of Jeeps.
Anthony.
Pickups. Again, a medium-duty like an F-350 or F-450 pickup. Those are Fords and loaders.
Now,
We'll have to see about
with
that
respect
if it
to,
comes in.
questions or what you were asked about by the trooper, was there a specific sort of street or plow route that the trooper was inquiring about?
I believe he asked who was down, that's Fairview, or down in the Cedar Crest area, that's what we call it. I believe that's what he asked me.
Your Honor, may I approach?
Yes.
Zoom, 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 zoom. Zoom, zoom. Zoom, zoom, zoom.
For that day. Yes, sir.
And what do you recognize it to be?
This would be a plow plan for that day. It's a plow plan for the season, but it is particularly a plow plan for that storm of January 28th through January 29 of 2022.
I used to make the swim lesson schedules and staffing at one of the pools I worked at, and that made my head explode. I can't imagine trying to do this. I imagine once it's in place, you just shift it a little bit, but it still seems like a lot.
May I approach again, Your Honor?
Yes.
I'm about to introduce in a minute.
Swim lesson
Thank you.
schedules were quite a lot. It was fun, but it was a lot.
For you that's now been marked as Exhibit 109, just have a couple questions for you in regard to what's listed there. So with regard to the top of the page, there's a listing as far as 1/28/2022 Boulevard 11 p.m. You see that?
Yes, sir.
And what does that mean, sir?
That means that the first group of workforce, which would be the Sanders, were scheduled to come in at 11 o'clock that night.
Now, as far as the next entry going across the top of the page has 1/29/2022, is that correct?
Yes.
And as far as what's listed as W&S/BM/REC at 2 a.m.
I'm only taking notes to stay engaged at this
W&S would
point.
be water and sewer. BM would be building maintenance. REC would be the rec, and they are scheduled. That would be the balance of the Canton's workforce. They were scheduled to come in at 2 o'clock in the morning.
And at 2 a.m., would that be at the same sort of central location?
Yes, they would all report to the Bolivar Street garage. I think that address is 150 Bolivar Street.
Now, as far as the next listing, it states contractors at 3 a.m. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And who is that referring to?
That would refer to all the private contractors that would be plowing that day. So again, it's staged.
Staged. Right.
And sort of the
Staggered.
last, sort of notation on the top of that, it indicates out at 5 a.m., 1/30/2022. Is that correct?
That would be when we completed and everybody went home.
Otter, I think
Now,
the
with reference
prosecution
to
with this
the,
is
Cedar Crest,
chasing
neighborhood
down a
area that
defense
includes
theory.
certain roads, there's different route numbers that are assigned. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And which route number would include that?
I don't know if it
That
matters
would be lower Cedar
for the
Crest number 11.
prosecution.
And from that, that would include lower.
We know
Cedar
the road
Crest,
was
Kings,
plowed.
Fairview, and Spring, correct?
Yes.
We
And
can see on
as
video
far
the road
as,
was plowed.
The vehicles and the vehicle types that were assigned to that route.
Just
to this list,
who plowed and
what
when did they
types were
plow?
Who was assigned to?
Truck 30, which would be a town of Canton truck. That's a 43 International. Brian Lochran would be the driver. The 43 International is a medium duty truck. The next up would be 7400 International. That would be the large construction truck. And there is an absolute, a by the yard 4x6, which is I believe that's a small 1-ton dump. That would have been the private contractor that was on the route with the city truck.
And so that truck 30, the 4300 International, is that a bigger truck or a smaller truck than the 1-ton?
Then the 1-ton?
Yes.
It's a larger truck. It's like a 3 to 5 cubic yard truck, and the large truck is like an 8 to 10 cubic yard dump. That's a dump truck.
Okay.
And as far as the height on that International, would that be, how much, would it be taller or shorter than say a 1-ton dump?
I would really like the prosecution to prove to me how they believe that Karen Reed did this before you try to prove to me that a snowplow didn't. Please, can we focus? Some of this could be saved for rebuttal, but the prosecution is going to pull themselves into a riptide with all of this and bury their actual case under chasing defense theories. This is for rebuttal. This should be for rebuttal.
If you want, I would estimate that if you're sitting in the driver's seat of a car, you're probably 2.5 feet.
Oh no,
when
we're
you're sitting in the driver's seat of a 1-ton, you're somewhere around 3 feet. When you're sitting in the driver's seat of this 4300, you're probably somewhere around 4 to 4.5 feet. And when you're sitting in the big construction truck, you're another 8 to 10 inches, 5 feet plus.
And when you're driving, or when the plow drivers are plowing the roads, what, if any, sort of instructions are they given as far as how
You forgot
to
the main
first start
quest,
plowing
though.
the roads when they first come upon, sort of dropping the plows and going?
If we're in a plowable situation, which is kind of hard to define, it's generally when we feel that traffic is impeded or may not be able to safely get up and down the street. So that's probably anywhere around 2 inches. They're instructed, and we're expecting a heavy snow. They're instructed to plow the middle of the road, keep the middle of the road open. And as they make their way through the route, they're supposed to push back a little bit. If they try to clean a whole lane and then come back and do the lane again, generally they end up being in trouble and they can't keep up if it's a heavy snow. So they're instructed to plow the middle of the road, to keep the roads open as much as they can before they do their finished cleanup.
Samantha in the chat said he takes his job pretty seriously, not sure if he would appreciate Hookers and Blow. I imagine he has a sense of humor, and the Hookers and Blow book that we love so much about a plow truck and a tow truck, plow truck, tow truck, I think he would appreciate it.
Sir, Michael Proctor called.
Now we're on cross-examination. Yay.
Michael Proctor called you on February 3rd of 2022. Does that sound right?
It may be, I'm not sure of the date.
It was within days of the big snowstorm, correct?
Yes.
You knew that he was investigating the death of John O'Keefe, which had occurred on January 29th, correct?
I did not know that.
Had you heard that there was a police officer who was found
dead on the lawn of another police officer in Canton.
Well, I knew, yes, I knew,
It's fairly big news at the
Yes.
time, correct? And were you aware that that was why Michael Proctor was calling you, related to that investigation?
after he called and identified himself, he said that is why he was calling.
Of course. Now, you spoke with him over the phone only, correct?
Yes,
He never came down to the DPW to meet you in person, correct?
not me, no.
And he never asked to interview any of your employees, correct?
I
would go through legal probably.
we may have discussed who was on that route and who plowed, but I'm not sure at that time if he had told me he was going to go talk to anybody else.
Oh, so it's your testimony that you may have told him the identity of the plow driver when you spoke with him on February 3rd over the phone.
I may have, but I am not positive.
You don't have a memory of him asking.
He's like,
you
if I
who
was
the
asked,
plow
I would
driver
have.
was.
He asked, no, I don't have a memory of his exact questions.
But leaving aside the exact wording of his questions, it's fair to say you don't have a memory of him asking you who plowed Fairview Road on January 29th. Is that fair to say?
He asked me about, I believe he asked me about this plow list.
About the what? The plow list?
The plow
This
list.
plow list.
Right, but on the plow list, there's the name by the yard, correct?
Yes,
All right. There's also, to the left of that, an indication of the name of the plow driver, and it's just a first name and a last initial,
Yes.
correct?
yes,
It doesn't spell out the whole last name, does it?
no,
But you know the full last name, correct?
yes,
You have a limited number of employees, right? It's not a 1,000-person company, right?
yes,
All right. And you're well familiar that Brian L. is Brian Laughlin, right?
yes.
As you sit here today, do you have any memory of whether the name Brian Laughlin was brought up during that phone call with Michael Proctor?
I may have said to him, that's who BL was, but I believe I referred him to the operations manager to double check who was on plowing that day.
Okay. You say you may have mentioned the name Brian L. or Brian Laughlin, but again, I'm just trying to drill down on what your memory is. Do you
This
have
is
a
still
memory
sped up.
one way or the other as to whether the name Brian Laughlin came up in that conversation?
If you are asking me, do I remember 100%? No.
Okay. In any case, Trooper Proctor, Michael Proctor, never asked to speak with Brian Laughlin when he talked to you over the phone,
He
correct?
did not ask me, no.
Did not ask me.
And
Right.
how short was that phone call with Michael Proctor?
If I tell you, you're going to ask me, how do I know for sure? I would say a few minutes, whatever a few minutes is.
I'm going to accept that answer. And you would agree with me.
It was a brief
that
call.
and you, by the way, you were trying to be helpful, correct?
Yes,
After that couple or 3-minute phone conversation, you'll agree with me that Michael Proctor never followed up again with you personally.
that's a good question. I am not sure.
Okay. Well, I'd like to direct your attention to about a week and a half later, specifically the date of February 14th of 2022, which maybe you don't remember the precise date, but around that time period, you came into work around that time period, and you learned that a defense investigator named Paul Mikowski had left his business card for you with somebody on the DPW staff, correct?
Objection.
Sustained. Ask it differently.
Yes.
I do not,
Sir, that means you
Oh.
don't answer that question. I think he's going to ask him the appropriate.
He's going to ask you a better way.
Do you recall when you came into work receiving a business card from Paul Mikowski?
no,
Do you recall calling Paul Mikowski back?
no,
Do you recall speaking to any investigator from the defense at any point within a couple of weeks after you spoke to Trooper Proctor?
no,
Do you deny telling Paul Mikowski to call Bill Walsh?
Objection.
Sustained.
Who is Bill Walsh?
Billy Walsh is the operations manager for
Is he
the,
the highway department supervisor?
yes,
Did the name Bill Walsh ever come up in your conversation with Michael Proctor back on February 3rd?
He said he referred him to
Did that name
operations.
come up when you first spoke with Trooper Proctor?
again, I believe I mentioned it, but I am not positive.
And is it fair to say that the Canton DPW has their own plowing and sanding trucks?
Yes,
Does one of them in particular
Do
have
they
a
not
nickname?
salt?
if they do, I don't know what they are.
Have you heard one of your trucks being called Frankenstein?
Objection.
Sustained.
You don't drive the trucks, correct?
No, I do not.
But Brian Loughran does?
Yes, he does.
And Brian Loughran was driving the truck that plowed Fairview on January 29th of
Yes.
2022?
Objection.
Let me have a moment.
Yes, it'll stand. The answer will stand.
Just call Brian then. Why is there another Brian? The plow driver for 34 Fairview was also a Brian? Okay. We knew that, but that was the driver on that route. I don't imagine there's much more here.
Yes.
Sorry.
He's approaching.
Well, I have, yes.
Do you have reading glasses as well? Or
Well, I have, yes.
you're able to read the exhibit that you have in front of you?
Yes.
Terrific. I'm handing you another document, sir, and I would ask if you would compare that document with the document you have in front of you and tell the jury if it's the same document or not.
I can't see the witness, so I can't know if I can zoom because we're just looking at Karen's face. Thank you.
Yes.
I will take the one back that does not have the exhibit sticker on it.
Those seem to be the same.
Thank you, sir. And I have no further questions. Thank you.
Any follow-up, Mr. Lally?
No, Your Honor, but may I just retrieve the exhibit?
Yeah.
That's it.
All right, Mr.
They're
Trotta,
gonna
you
need
are
to call
all
the-
set, sir. Thank you very much.
All right.
The plow driver. Thank you, sir.
Okay, your next witness, please.
Your Honor, the Commonwealth call Mr. Louis Jutras to the stand.
Definitely need a spelling on that. I think this is the last witness for the afternoon of day 18. Remember, we are filling in the afternoon of day 18 because I did not cover it when my friend was in town. It's been very, very, life has been busy the last few weeks as it gets at the end of May and into June. So that's why we are finishing up these witnesses. So the testimony will live on here on the channel. And for those of you that didn't see that testimony before, you have it now. And for those of you that did see it before, thank you for joining me anyway, just to hang
All right,
out in the
Mr.
chat with the
Lally.
law nerds.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
This is witness
Well, please state your
49.
name and spell your last name for the jury.
Louis Jutras, Jutras.
And where do you live, sir?
Stoughton, Massachusetts.
And how long have you lived in Stoke?
About 23 years.
And what is it that you do for work, sir?
I work for the town of Canton. I am the manager of the Information Systems Division of the Finance Department.
He's of the
And
finance
how long have you-
department.
Sorry, what was the last part?
Of the Finance Department.
Thank you.
And sir, how long have you held that position?
Almost 25 years.
Now, if you could explain to the jury, just as far as your job is concerned, what does that relate to, or what is it that you do as a director of informational services?
Sure. So my responsibilities are for the municipal departments and all the technology associated with that.
And does that include everything sort of from cell phones to GPS in town vehicles to security systems, things of that nature?
Yes.
Now, with reference to your department, how many people work in your department?
There's 3 of us in total, myself and 2 others.
Do you essentially supervise the other 2 people as well?
Yes.
Now, at some point, if I could turn your attention to around the time of January 29th, 2022, some point after that, did someone from law enforcement or from a police department reach out to you in regard to security cameras or camera systems within the town of Canton?
Oh, good. We got right to
Yes,
the
I
point.
received a notification from the Lieutenant Gallagher that there was a motor vehicle incident in town, that the state police would be looking for some video footage.
And so you received an initial notification from Lieutenant Gallagher telling you that the state police would be reaching out looking for video.
Correct.
And at some point shortly after that, did you receive any sort of, did anybody from the state police reach out?
Yes. Trooper Dunn reached out. We had a phone conversation. And we had email correspondence relative to dates and times. We had pulled some footage from one site in Pequiside Farm that was put together. And then after that, there was a request for anything facing Washington Street, either from Town Hall or from the library.
And so as far as what was relayed to you by Trooper Dunn, what was sort of the description or what was it that you, were they asking just specifically timeframes, or did you get any other information as far as what you were looking for?
From what I recall, there were 2 different timeframes, between 12 and 1, and then between 5 and 6. That was in our discussion and correspondence relative to Town Hall.
And just to be clear, that's from 12 a.m. to 1 a.m. and then 5 a.m. to 6 a.m.?
Correct.
Now, as far as the Pequiside Farm, describe to the jury sort of what kind of location that is or what kind of town property it is and where it is in relation to the town.
Yes, so the physical area is off of Pleasant Street, which intersects with Washington Street, closest to Dedham Street and the police department. That's a large area, big white house, and we have cameras that face the entrance, the street, and the surrounding building.
As far as the coverage from those cameras, have you had occasion on either this occasion or prior occasions or subsequent occasions to look at sort of the view that the camera gets from Techwood Side Farm?
Yes, yeah, we have a straight shot down from the building, down the entrance driveway, right to the street. The other cameras that are around there's a couple of doorbell type cameras that physically focus on specific sections, and then other ones cover the general grounds around the building and the backside.
Right. So can I interrupt for a minute, sir? Could you please spell the name of the farm?
Yep, Pequiside, Pequitside.
Thank you.
Sir, Mr. Jutras, is it fair to say that the Pequot Side Farm cameras cover more of the property and less of the street out in front? Is that correct?
Yes.
Now, as far as that was the initial request was in regard to Pequot Side, is that correct?
Correct.
And so the subsequent
It's
request.
a hard word.
That was for anything town hall or library that physically faced Washington Street.
And so the town hall and the library, sort of where are they situated in relation to each other and in relation to
Oh,
Washington?
gosh.
Yep, so
They're-
they physically abut on either side of Washington Street, right at the intersection of Sherman. They are diagonal to each other.
Okay.
As far as the recording devices or the cameras on town buildings within the town of Canton, are those, are they sort of uniform or does it vary from location to location or vary within the location?
The physical model of the recorder, as far as the manufacturer, that is the same that we have across 15
don't
different
know.
sites. The types of cameras do change, interior,
Elizabeth asked, why is
exterior,
the judge
doorbell,
taking
things like
notes?
that.
The
But
judge,
all the actual recording units
I'm going to
are
pause
the
this and
same
answer.
manufacturer.
The judge takes notes throughout the trial because if the judge is asked to rule on objections, the witness said this, the witness said that, the judge will need to refresh their recollection. So the judge needs to running their own notes of the trial because they are asked to rule on things and they can't go back to playback. Sometimes they can ask the court reporter to read something back, but they need their own running impressions of the case as they're going through so they can make their rulings. Every judge does it differently, but they are keeping a log for their own use when it comes to objections and such. So most attorneys will also keep some kind of a running log when they're asking questions. Like if the answers vary, they'll have somewhere on their notes to add that. The other side will be taking notes. So there's always kind of a back and forth on notes during live trial.
Just different
Hopefully that
sizes and models.
And as far as the town hall and the public library cameras, as far as the exterior cameras at least, they face in that area of Washington Street and actually capture portions of Washington Street?
Yes. Yep.
Sorry, Mary.
Now, as far as the cameras are concerned,
Mary
particularly
said,
the
I got to blame
exterior
EDB for getting me so involved in this case. I'm not even body doubling. I'm so hooked.
How are they sort of set
Today
up?
is not the day. It's
Is
okay.
it one continuous recording? Are they motion activated? How are they?
Yes, the cameras, based on size and so on, they're all set up for motion in pretty much all of our locations.
That makes
As
sense.
far as from your review of those cameras, is there any sort of indication on the footage as far as date and timestamp or anything like that?
Yes, we usually have it in one of the corners or someplace along when we have the video saved off and exported.
And when you were able to pull the video that the troopers were requesting, the date and timestamp affixed to those videos, was that accurate as to what the date and timestamp actually was at the time that it's recording?
Yes, I would believe so.
Well, was it or wasn't it?
And sort of those date and timestamps, you know where they come from?
Generally, the
The
system.
system is linked to a time server, which is remote and is used from the national standards.
Which is very helpful.
Now, as far as the video is concerned from those, they're motion activated, but how far back do they go as far as how many days pass before, does it get sort of overwritten at some point?
Yes, depending on the site, most of them, because of the motion activated, because of various request types and so on, and the number of the cameras, we usually try to get about 30 days. There are some that go longer because the site is or isn't used as much.
That's a good amount
And
of
then there are
time.
other ones where, specifically with the library, they only requested to have a maximum of 30 days on that device.
30 days is a good amount of time.
And so when you received this request from the troopers, that was well within 30
Longer
days,
than
is that correct?
most.
Yes, yeah, because we're talking February 7th for the last request.
Now, as far as the video that you exported, well, let me ask you this. As far as when you were asked to retrieve that video, can you explain sort of mechanically the process of how you got that video and how you delivered that to the trooper?
Yeah, so specifically for the town and the library one, that again, time frame provided, using the manufacturer's software product, doing the search, picking the cameras that are facing the Washington Street side, and then having the time frame and exporting that out. That becomes, depending on the size of it, either a full executable that can just be opened and viewed, or a combination of files that has a player with it.
Goes on a thumb drive.
And then based on the fact that we had already put videos together and that material was picked up, I had sent a file share link for that information.
You had sent that file share link to Trooper Dunn, is that correct?
Correct.
Now, as far as the video that you reviewed, were you sort of parsing, or were you looking for specific areas, or did you just sort of
He
take
said
the whole
time.
time period requested and send that off to the trooper?
As far as I recall, it was the whole time frame, just because we only have 2 cameras or so that physically cover the area in question, and he had 2 separate hours in question as well. So they were able to be exported and sent.
Now, as far as this particular video, this is video only, correct? There's no audio that's attached to these cameras?
Correct, no audio.
Now, as far as access to these cameras and the footage within the cameras, who, if anyone besides yourself, would have access to remove any sort of footage from the cameras?
No one.
Okay. Why is there such a long pause?
Now, sir, before
Like, you
get to
know,
the camera footage specifically, I just want to ask you about another area.
Hmm?
In relation to
you know what the questions are,
also
Lally?
within sort of the ambit of your duties and responsibilities would include GPS on town trucks, correct?
Yes, Public Works has a setup via their radios for GPS information.
And so with regard to that, specifically the DBW trucks, what, if any, information did you receive from anyone at the DBW in relation to those GPS devices within the trucks shortly after the snowstorm from the 28th and the 29th of January?
Yep. So on February 1st, I received notification from the operations manager that the GPS information was not working.
And so you received information after the snowstorm that it wasn't working during the snowstorm, is that correct?
Correct.
And as far as that, as far as GPS sort of going down in the DBW trucks, is that abnormal, or how often would that occur?
Yes, it happens several times throughout the year for various reasons. They have a radio repeater. It's connected through a network. It runs software on a server that we have in-house. Server's rebooted, network goes down, things that, change for various reasons, and we need to reestablish connection to whatever recorder it is for that repeater, and then the information is then picked up.
Now, taking you back to the Canton Public Library video that you provided to the trooper, were you told anything about sort of any type of vehicle or anything to be looking for within that particular video?
Shouldn't. He should have just pulled the time
Not that I
frames.
recall.
Yeah.
Did you recall ever actually watching the video yourself as far as confirming sort of what it was?
Yes, I watched it from the time frame to see that we had information, watched it just to move forward to the end to make sure there was information, and when the recording, was physically available. But what was in it, no.
May I approach?
Yes.
So didn't pay a lot of attention to what was in it. Was just looking for video during the time frame. Right. We're going to zoom past
Video
approaching.
from the Canton Public Library. You've seen that video subsequently, is that correct?
This disc with the wording on it?
Yes.
No, I have not seen this.
Not that specific disc, I'm sorry, sir. But the footage, have you been shown that particular video footage, or did you review that footage before you gave it to the troopers?
This is not mine to the trooper.
Understood.
So what is it?
May we approach?
Okay.
He said he sent a link. Well, Lally, you can't get that into evidence if it's not the right one. All right. We're going to zoom through this sidebar.
All right, so you both agree that this would be the next exhibit?
Well, they both agreed on the exhibit.
All right, so you both agree that this would be the next exhibit?
Yes. Yes, ma'am.
Hand that to Manuel.
I bet you he sent a link to the trooper. I bet you the trooper made the disc, not him. But he's going to be like, of course it's not mine. He sent a link. Oh, Lally.
All right, so the parties agree that this is the next exhibit, correct?
Yes, sir.
Lally should know exactly where it came from before he asked the witness about it. I don't know how you get this far in this case and not know.
To briefly briefly, publish portions from those.
Hold on.
Oh, video. This witness doesn't even know what's on the video because that's not his disc.
Ms. Gilman, if I could have the first video portion from 12 a.m. to 1 a.m.
No, the parties agreed. The defense wasn't going to jam Lally here, which is appropriate because they know that what's on the video is what's on the video, and this witness is going to identify it. Some defense attorneys might have tried to jam the prosecution on this. The judge probably would have gotten pissed about it, but Lally should know that. So this is from outside the library at on 1/29/2022, right at midnight.
What's up on the screen?
Yes, I do.
And as far as the view from this camera, this is from the library, is that correct?
Correct.
And so as far as what we're looking at here, this is the view from the camera as you observed it on the security camera and as you provided it to the jury, correct?
Yes, sir.
I'm sorry, sir. Do you have is there a laser pointer up on the desk in front of you?
Yes, sir.
Are you familiar with this area as far as the area of Canton?
Yes, yes. Town Hall is right across the street.
And I'm sorry, I stepped right over your words when you were saying that.
Yeah, so Town Hall is right across the street, and the intersection here is at Sherman, and this is Washington along the street that you'll see.
So Washington sort of runs parallel with the street, and then Sherman is the street that appears to intersect with Washington.
Correct.
In the area of Town Hall.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. So if you could take that down and then just put up the...
You can tell Lally's not in front of the mic. He's very hard to hear.
Again, sir, what's up on the screen? Do you recognize
This is
that?
at 5 a.m.
Yes.
Is this essentially the video that you...
More snow.
Retrieved from the Canton Town Library from 5 a.m. to 6 a.m.
But it's not
on that day, January 29th.
insane
sir.
amounts of
And
snow.
the orientation as far as Washington Street, Sherman Street, that's all the same in reference to the earlier. The camera has moved.
Correct.
Thank you. You can take that.
How? What?
I may have one moment, Charlie.
Yes.
Thank you very much, sir. I have no further questions, sir.
All right, to cross-examination.
Good afternoon, Mr. Jutras.
Good afternoon, attorney.
So confirming the state police, when they contacted you, asked for 2 hours of video footage, right? Between 12 and 1 a.m. on January 29th and between 5 and 6 a.m. on January 29th, correct?
Yes, sir.
You pulled that video footage, or at least arranged for it to be pulled for the state police, correct?
Yes.
And I believe your testimony was that you checked the beginning time and the ending time to make sure that you had the right time periods for those 2 hours, correct?
Yes.
But you did not sit down and watch 1 hour of snow falling
Well, if
and or
it's-
cars driving by the public library, correct?
That is correct.
You
I
didn't
did
do that
not.
for between 12 and 1 or between 5 and 6.
Correct. I did not.
And at the time that you provided the video footage to the state police, did you know whether or not there was any missing footage within those 2 hours?
No.
What do you
Again,
mean by
I did not
minute?
play every single second of the video.
Understood. It's fair to say, and you're certain, that you did not cut out any of the video footage in those 2 time periods, correct?
Correct. It's motion activated. That's the only piece.
You provided the state police with the raw footage as it existed in your possession at that time, correct?
Yes.
And at that time, you knew that the raw footage was only saved for between 30 and 60 days?
That one is less than 30. Yes.
Right. Now, as of early February, when you were dealing with the state police, you knew that Karen Reed had been arrested and charged in court, correct?
I do not recall if I had that information.
You knew that there had been a police officer found dead on the lawn of another police officer in Canton?
At that time in February,
He's like, I don't know
believe so.
if I knew.
And that likely would have been discussed when the state police called you?
I do not recall the conversation other than asking for video footage for Washington Street.
And I'm sorry, sir, if you could just keep if I can't hear you, I guarantee you that these last jurors can't hear you. Could you just repeat that last question?
Yep. Again, when in the conversation with it, we had the dates and the timeframes, and anything else relative to it, I do not recall specifically the conversation.
Okay. So you don't have a memory of why you were being asked for this?
Correct. I know it was for
He gets asked a lot.
motor vehicle accident. Who and what, I do not recall if that was ever mentioned specifically.
Okay. And you would agree with me that as the IT director, you had the ability, if you wanted to download the footage onto some hard drive to preserve it, if you wanted to do that?
He linked it.
Yes.
Did any state trooper ever ask you to download and preserve that footage so that it would exist longer than that 30 to 60 day period?
No.
And so
Didn't
it's
you
fair to say
provide a
did
copy?
not do that, correct?
Correct.
You complied with what?
What? But if he provides a copy, doesn't he have to download it?
Who and what? I do not recall if that was ever mentioned
I'm
specifically.
confused.
And you would agree with me that as the IT director, you have the ability, if you wanted to download the footage onto
He
some
probably
hard
has to be
drive to preserve
asked
it, if
for
you wanted to do
policy.
that.
Yes.
Did any state trooper ever ask you to download and preserve that footage so that it would exist longer than that 30 to 60 day period?
No.
And so it's fair to say you did not do that, correct?
Correct.
You complied with what they asked you to do.
Yes.
Now, skipping ahead to April 6th of 2023, you were
This
contacted
is still
by
sped
Michael
up.
Proctor, a state trooper investigating this matter, correct?
I do not recall.
Do you recall Michael Proctor asking you to provide to the defense in this case the same raw footage you had previously provided to the state police?
No.
And you don't recall telling him that you couldn't do that because after 30 to 60 days, footage is gone, correct?
I had a phone call with what I thought was Trooper Dunn asking for another copy of the data and telling him that I did not have it and I couldn't recreate it.
I see. Oh, so you assume
If it was Proctor.
What?
But no, I thought I was speaking with Trooper Dunn.
Trooper Dunn was the name that you remembered from February.
Correct. That was the first interaction I had.
And when they mentioned state police, you assumed it was the same state police trooper, correct?
Yes.
It's fair to say
What?
that once you shared the footage with the state police in February of 2022, you didn't control what they did with it after that, correct?
Correct.
And you have no personal knowledge about how they preserved it or didn't preserve it, correct?
I'll allow it. Do you have any idea?
No.
And one last question. You cannot testify about whether any video was removed from the footage after you provided it, correct?
Objection.
Sustained.
That's speculation. But
Thank you.
No redirect, Your Honor.
All right, sir, you are all set.
I have questions.
Have another witness.
I do not, Your Honor, no. May we approach this on?
It looks like we're done with witnesses. I've got questions because this witness said no. A trooper contacted me in April and said, can you provide us the raw footage? And he's like, yeah, that's gone. Why didn't you save the raw footage I gave you? The prosecution showed some footage. So I'm curious now if the prosecution's footage is complete, if it's not complete. There's just questions left. I'm not going to speculate about what that means based on that cross, other than troopers asked, can you recreate that, and couldn't. The defense insinuated that there is missing time, and he said it's motion activated. So if there's no motion, there wouldn't be a full hour. So I have a lot of questions about that. I'm going to fast forward through
In
this.
fairness, I didn't tell the lawyers that I was hoping to go until 4. So
You are unmuted.
in fairness, I didn't tell the lawyers that I was hoping to go until 4.
So they don't have another witness.
And I understand this sometimes happens with law enforcement witnesses, they get called away. So that's it for today. Now, next week, I would like to go as much as we possibly can on the days that we're here for full days. So Monday is a full day. I would like to go until 4:30 if everybody can with the shortened lunch hour. Tuesday, we're not in session. Wednesday is a full day again. We'll go right till 4:30.
That's tomorrow.
Shortened lunch. Thursday is a half day, maybe even closer to 12. And Friday, we will not be in session. So those are dates that we gave you before. So
All right.
we will get as much done as we possibly can during that period of time. Okay, so those same cautions. Please do not discuss this case with anyone. Don't do any independent research or investigation into this case. If you happen to see, hear, or read anything about this case,
And that's
please
the end of
disregard it.
day
Think about it.
18.
Disregard this case.
From
Don't think about it.
Tuesday-
Leave everything here and have a great few days. We'll see you
Where's our
next
day? From Tuesday, May 28th. Tomorrow, we will resume live court. I've got to record the podcast later today, so that's what I'm going to be doing. So members, you will get a notification when I go to record the podcast. I'm going to go through some of your questions. Of course, we're going to do a bit of a wrap up. So, a busy afternoon in court. And more questions than answers once again. So as they get everybody out of court, I always like to leave it running.
For scheduling, I will actually see you over here for scheduling purposes.
I hate it when they go to sidebar for scheduling. Can't you just tell all of us so we know? It would just be so much better if you did it on the record so everyone would know together what we were doing. It would just be better. It's a long sidebar. But the court had planned on going till 4:30 this day, and it seems did not get nearly as much testimony as was desired. So we're going to zoom while they're at sidebar for scheduling. I imagine at sidebar for scheduling, the judge is like, yo, can we speed this up a bit? Because we've secured this jury for 8 weeks and we are pushing it. And nothing else on the record. All right. So with that, we are at the end of day 18. Let's do a quick swoop, a quick summary, and then I'm going to get to some of your questions. So at the end of day 18, which was the afternoon of May 28th session, the state started calling their more expert witnesses. The ER doctor who saw John O'Keefe and also, well, doesn't remember, but also saw Karen Reed before her blood was drawn. The lab techs and pathologists who did the alcohol reading for Karen Reed's blood, and then getting into the town of Canton professionals who maintained the snowplow routes and the video system for the town that is motion activated. What we learned from that is that Karen Reed's blood alcohol, when it was drawn at the hospital at 9:08 a.m. the morning of January 29th, was a 9.3. The extrapolation to that, because you have to move from the medical use of the serum blood alcohol to the legal use of the whole blood alcohol, would have put her BAC in a range. Let me go to my notes because I wrote down the two different ranges, and I very much don't want to get those wrong since she is charged with operating under the influence causing death. Let me make sure I have those pulled up. So they put her blood alcohol at the time of the test. Where was it? Between a 0.078 and a 0.083 with an average of a 0.081. That is at 9 a.m. They also did a retrograde extrapolation. This is the crime lab witness, and determined the range at the time of driving in this case would have been they say, a 0.135 to a 0.292. On cross-examination, the defense pointed out that if Karen Reed had not taken her last drink at 12:45, as the crime lab was told, but had drank later on or earlier on in the morning, or later on in the morning, be after 2 a.m., 3 a.m., 4 a.m., if she had had any alcohol then, it would completely throw off that retrograde extrapolation number. And the witness agreed, yes, it would completely throw off the retrograde extrapolation number. And that is going to be a matter of contention as this case continues. We also heard from the person who maintains all the schedules for the plows, and that Trooper Proctor called him and he said, you can call operations and these are the plow routes. And then we heard from the IT individual that maintains or provided the camera footage from outside the library, who said that those cameras are motion activated. The raw footage is kept for less than 30 days, and that law enforcement asked for that footage to be sent, and he provided a link for law enforcement to download and save that footage. The defense asked on cross-examination if this witness was aware that minutes of footage were missing, and he said, no, I looked at the front of the timestamp around midnight to the end of the timestamp that I was told around 1 a.m. and 5 a.m. to 6 a.m. I looked at those times and made sure there was video captured, because again, it's motion activated, that there was video captured at those times. And then I provided all the footage between those bumpers. And that's what was provided to law enforcement. And then sometime in April 2023, law enforcement reached out to that IT individual and said, hey, can you reprovide that raw footage? And the individual said, no, that's long gone. I provided it to you back when you asked it, but the IT department did not independently save it after it was sent to law enforcement, which in my experience is not uncommon. Once they send it to law enforcement, they're like, it's on y'all to preserve it and copy it, unless they are expressly and specifically told to keep it on their end for some reason. Oftentimes that will be asked for in the warrant or subpoena for that footage, but it was not done here. And with all of that, we are at the end of day 18. Let's do some housekeeping. Tomorrow is a full day in court, so get your snackies. We will be starting around 8:15 a.m. Central Standard Time. If you don't have the Law Nerd app yet, it is the best way to stay in the loop with when I am going live. And if you are members on the channel or in the app, then you will know when I am doing members only behind the scenes and when I'm doing members only recordings of the podcast, which I'll be doing this afternoon. So, full day in court. Thursday's a half day in court. Thursday, I will be premiering the podcast after court, and I will be in the chat with you. Friday, no court. I am taking the day completely offline. I hope you do too, because I need a day to recover and start to get ready for the rest of the month, including VidCon and more. So you've got questions, I've got questions, we've got questions. So I'm going to go through some of your questions, but one of the things we were talking about during all of this was DUIs. Parrot Court Channel said we had a drunk driver 3 days ago that got off the road that tested at a 0.358. That is incredibly high. Jessica Hicks said highest DUI BAC was 0.4. He was a military member and was a chronic drinker. Aaron said, I used to work in DWI court. The highest I saw was a 0.35. I'm not sure how they were still alive at that level. It can be very confusing. Dusty said, my husband had a 0.36. I'm guessing that's he, her, either way. When went to get sober 8 years. Congratulations on the sobriety. But there were a lot of comments from all of y'all talking about the levels of DUIs you have seen. The highest BAC I ever saw in DUI court, and I worked not only DUI cases, but vehicular related deaths, was a 0.43 for a 8 a.m. An 8 a.m. BAC draw because the driver had hit a family on the way to school. Nobody died in that case. It was a fairly slow collision, but the driver had gotten into the car and was driving and was still standing. And at a 0.43, this was a very small human. I was very surprised to see that level of intoxication with someone who clearly, drank quite a lot, and frequently to still be upright and driving a vehicle, not well, but upright and driving a vehicle at that level. And the judge was just like, what? How? We sent it out for retesting. Because I thought it was a scientific error. It was not a scientific error. And yes, that was a female defendant. It was not an error. And that was, I think, it was their third DUI. Could have been their second DUI, but it was getting to the point where it would become felony DUI. And I had very strong feelings about it. I'm like, this person needs help, but also needs to not be driving because you are going to kill someone. It's often that the drunk drivers their bodies are relaxed, and they are not the ones that end up perishing oftentimes in those collisions, which is very, very frustrating. But it's a whole situation when you see these DUI related collisions. But yes, they retested it and it was what it was. It was so, so frustrating to see. I'm like, do not be on the road. And for those of you asking, did they lose their license? That individual had already lost their license in a DUI and was driving without a license, without insurance, and while intoxicated. Though I did see quite a number of DUIs when I was running juvenile court, and that always surprised me when I saw like 14-year-olds with DUIs. I'm like, excuse me. You're not supposed to be drinking. You're not supposed to be driving. The combination of the both at 14 is astounding to me. What are you doing? So I was always surprised when we had juvenile DUIs, and it happened more frequently than I ever would have imagined in juvenile court. It just absolutely blew my mind. And frustrated the fuck out of me, honestly. I was like, look, you at this point should not be driving. You do not have the experience. Just what are you doing? And also, why do you think that this is okay? Anyway, sometimes the interlock devices work pretty well where people have to blow into the interlock device before driving, but just absolutely so sad. So anyway, I could rant about DUIs forever. Avoidable. They are avoidable. We see multiple housewives getting DUIs, and it's like, just, this is the problem with drinking. This is why we talk about it. You don't make good decisions when drinking. You have to make the good decision before you go drinking. So if you know you are going to drink, you need to leave the car wherever it is and arrange for you to have a ride or arrange for you to not drink. So it's just absolutely wild. So with all of that, it's just wild. So Kubi says, as someone who was run over and pinned down by an SUV, Kubi, I'm so sorry. John's injuries thus far don't make sense. Waiting to hear from the coroner or medical examiner. Same. Literally, at this point, I am so frustrated that we don't know that it's making me suspicious. I want to hear what happened to the victim. Stat. I am just so frustrated. Genevieve said, thanks for the company during maternity leave. You're welcome. My daughter's name is Chloe, and she loves ceiling fans. So this case in courtroom, our baby approved. Yay, Chloe. And yes, at that age, ceiling fans are fascinating. Celebrating the end of exams. Hey, Colleen, congratulations. Happy law nerding with you. Happy law nerding with you too. We'll be here most of the week. So that's fantastic. Knights who say knee. Knights who say E. Fun fact about the Manassas Hospital where the ER doctor did a stint at. It is the hospital that made national news for the Bobbitt penis reattachment surgery recently. It's a hospital that doesn't have the best local reputation. That's fascinating. I don't know what to say about that other than that's fascinating. I hope you had a nice weekend. Amy, I had a great weekend. It was just, I'm tired, but it was great. Great and exhausting go hand in hand sometimes. Sammy spills the tea. Love a bonus trial day. Work isn't the same without court. I'm sorry. We're going to have post-trial. Well, we might. No, God, we might not. You guys.
We might not. So normally there's like a trial, and then there's a period where we don't have trial, and we get to catch up on all the other shit that's going on, and it's nice. And then we all get a break, and I get to sleep a little bit more. But I'm very worried that there will be no break.
Like, I think we're going to run from this trial right into Baldwin. I am concerned. I am concerned we are going to run right into the Baldwin case. Just very, very concerned. Michelle San Giorgio in the chat asked, throat any better? My voice is doing better today. I am back home where it is much more humid in my house, and I have a humidifier in my office, and I've been able to like ungunk myself. Emily, I don't know how much more of Lolly I can take. Same. Emily, how in the world will we serve jury duty on this trial and Baldwin trial at the same time? We're not doing that. Do not put that into the universe. This trial has to end before July. It has to be done. I am looking forward to taking the week around 4th of July off. It has to be done. I have Dave Matthews concerts. I have VidCon. We have things to do. Jessica said, when you were a prosecutor, how would you start off with qualifications for an expert witness? I would ask them their most basic background training and experience, and I would generally ask if they had been recognized as an expert in court before and how many times. And if the defense needed to go back and argue they weren't an expert, I would get into it more. But generally, especially with medical experts, it's how long have you been a doctor for? And are you board certified? I didn't go into where did you go to school unless it was important to the case for some reason, or unless the defense was going to fight on the witness's expertise, which with ER docs and stuff rarely happens that they're fighting that person's like not a doctor. So unless their credibility was hugely at risk, I wouldn't spend that much time on it because the jury's like, okay, you're a doctor. Can you tell me what happened? They don't want to know where you went to med school and stuff unless it was locally important. Tama Jen said, please answer this question from day 19. I keep asking, but no answer. I do my best. I have no idea what that timestamp is. Based on that instruction, what information would I as a juror take from that? I don't remember what the judge read out, but the judge was, I do remember what the judge read out. The judge was just reminding the jury that the questions of the attorneys are not evidence. The answers are evidence. So what a jury is to remember, particularly, is when the lawyers are saying things as if they're fact, that they can't take it as fact. Those are just questions. What, if anything, did you sort of name yourself? How long did it take you to learn to say that? I'm like, I don't remember what we were talking about. But it's probably because I say it often. So there's that. Mama Hype, I will let Dr. B know he was very helpful in bringing the coffee today after he went to the gym. This is before I have to take my other kiddo to the gym because he is working on his gains for the summer. My teen is very much like, I am going to throw this rifle the highest in the air anyone has ever seen. So we have exceeded, our home gym is very much for me to stretch and like walk. And my teen has exceeded all of that. And when he tries to do plyometrics, it sounds like he's going to break through the ceiling in my house. So we had to give him somewhere else to go and do the things. Music to my soul, said Emily, I hereby stipulate that I am biased in favor of the ER doctor because he went to UVA, which is near and dear to my heart. I am an alum. And that is okay to be like, oh, you went to UVA. I mean, the ER doc did what he did and saw what he saw, which was like, yep, I treated this person. We were trying to resuscitate them and warm them up, and that did not work. And then we pronounced them. But didn't really get into much more of the injuries, really. Mike Durando just said, I just want to say how much I have loved spending the last 2 years with you. Thank you, EDB and the mods. You guys are the best. I found my people. That's how I feel, too, about the law nerds. Sinister Girls, unrelated, wanted to thank EDB for keeping me sane the last 6 months. I've been on medical leave. Sinister, I hope the medical leave is helpful and you get the rest and recovery that you need. And the law nerds are here, for sure. It's a me, it's a Lally, a sisterly. I love it. K and Wags, if a grand jury is so secret, why are there transcripts? After the grand jury is done, there will be transcripts. But before the grand jury comes to a conclusion, it will not be released. And those transcripts will generally not be part of court records and transcripts, but the attorneys have to have them. Because if a witness testifies behind closed doors and you don't give it to the defense, it's a violation of the law. So it's secret that they're convening. But once the indictment comes down or once the decision is made, then the attorneys get it, etc. So that happens. Xander Ryan, hold on. Xander, I'm going to answer your question, but I turned my fan off because my air conditioning had kicked in and then my air conditioning kicked off and now I'm getting hot again. Can we talk about how CERT isn't a CSI unit or even a forensic unit, but rather a search and rescue team? Why the fuck did MSP have so much prep time and still send in an adequate team? Am I irate for Officer O'Keefe? Nobody asked why CERT was who rolled out, but yes, it seems that they are a search and rescue and recovery team. And they said, we've never collected evidence in the snow. We do people recovery. We look for individuals. So I don't know. The Great Big Geek, at this point, there are so many questions. It's very frustrating. James said, yesterday I heard you saying you didn't like how Bev had the lawyers label their exhibits. How come there isn't a standard? I don't like the way Bev switched gears on them. And most courtrooms have a standard where the judge has a standard. What I'm frustrated with is that the attorneys had pre-marked their exhibits. And then the judge said, no, I want you to mark them as they're being admitted. And it has slowed everything down. So that's what frustrates me. Because she wasted their time with allowing them to pre-mark exhibits, unless they all just assumed that would be fine and didn't ask her, and then that's on them. But it's frustrating that they had it pre-marked to avoid the waste of time, and then it's still becoming an issue. So I feel bad for the attorneys, and I feel bad for the jury, and I feel bad that the attorneys are getting fussed at, and the jury's being told, and it's often negative to the prosecutor, the jury's being told, I'm so sorry that we're wasting your time, essentially, by the judge, which makes the prosecutor look bad. So the judge is calling out the prosecutor in front of the jury. She's done it to the defense too. But when it comes to this, she is calling out the jury more frequently. So let us continue. Jessica asked if I saw the lawyer stream last night. I didn't. He said that he spoke with a doctor that said in some cases blunt force trauma from the back of the head can cause brain and eyes to swell forward. We haven't gotten to that testimony yet, but I know from my own cases and experience that can happen. There's a lot of types of blunt force trauma that can cause swelling to the face like that, but we're just not there yet. So I'm interested to see what we get from the pathologist. So Melanie said, gosh, I really missed you on this day. Now we have a complete circle. Yes, I don't want to leave days out. I learned when I had to travel during Depp Heard, and even when I had to travel during Gutierrez, that not having the full days of testimony on the channel create frustration years later when people are like, I wanted to watch this whole trial and I'm missing like this part and this part and that part. So I saw that feedback and said, okay, well, we can make sure we fix the feedback. Kel Marie said, or we fix the issue and take the feedback. So appreciate it. Kel Marie said, my sweet Ponard passed unexpectedly Friday. I'm so sorry. I'm so grateful for this community when I desperately need a distraction. It is a very unique kind of loss because it changes the vibe of your house. So Kel, I am sorry for that loss. And I hope that the distraction is helpful as you grieve. It is, the loss of a pet is a unique type of loss, and it is very, very hard to recover from, I have found. Even now I look at Fred and George sometimes and I'm like, I still miss Albus, you guys. The ginger cats are a whole different vibe than my beloved Albus, who picked me when I was in law school. So it is a very different situation. But these cats are very much attuned to my boys. So my house is all crazy boys. Delightful, wild, what is going on in your head, boys? Casey Cat said he is correct, but the Emmy would do full body x-rays. The Emmy should do all kinds of stuff. We just haven't seen it yet. And I hope that we do sometime soon. Kiki said, all my packages arrived when I was on vacation. I forgot what I ordered. What a beautiful tumbler. Isn't it prettier in person? The colors don't translate quite right, but I love it. I love it. I love it. Depending on what MS meds Karen uses, it could affect her BAC. I imagine that will come up in the defense case for sure. Wolf Kiara said 1 year in, the level of nonsense in this case is so high. And trying to stay to, especially as this case goes on, trying to stay to just what's happening in trial can be really, really hard. 20th Century Fox said, I love my new fax hat just arrived. Isn't it great? I also love the soda can glass. I like that too, especially because we live here now. We live here again with this trial. We have all moved to Massachusetts in the summer. The one Lo-Fi 2, weren't they all drinking and driving? Yes, no one received a DUI except Karen. Well, Karen was the only one who was blood tested, and they believe that she hit someone. So yes, that is why. Yes, but yes, there was lots of drinking and driving. MLS God of Law said, how is this case going? Slowly. It's going slowly. Really, really slowly. Cindy Lou Hoot, you should invite New York attorney Mark Bedrow on your show. You two would be amazing together. I rarely have guests anymore, but it's always a possibility. Not while we're in trial, though. I can't manage it. I truly can't manage it. So it is rare these days that we have guests on the channel because it just is a lot for me to manage. Morning, can you explain what chain of custody problems there could be if the Commonwealth doesn't put on Trooper Proctor? We're not even close to there yet, but if Trooper Proctor maintains some of the chain of custody, then you're missing parts of the chain of custody. Then there are huge issues. Could some evidence be thrown out if they can't prove chain of custody? Sometimes it will go to the weight, not the admissibility, but it really just depends. And it's hard because we're not there yet. Some things have been stipulated to, and it's hard to know what's been stipulated to and what has not been stipulated to because it happens outside of our presence. I saw some of you guys asking if the jurors can take notes. Yes, they can. This jury can take notes, and those notes are collected at the end of the day. and or at the end of the session and then kept safe. A lizard in Crimson said he has Holiday's voice from the movie Ready Player One. I created the Oasis because I never felt at home in the real world. I liked the book a lot better. I was really, the Ready Player One movie made me kind of sad because I love the books, but that's okay. Amy Z said only EDB can get me to watch this insanely boring testimony again. You don't ever have to do that, but I appreciate you. So thank you. One Lo-Fi 2 said, and how do you get charged with a DUI the day after? I thought it had to be in the act to be charged. No, if they have evidence that she was driving and evidence that she was drinking, they can charge it after. It's just unusual that they do, but it can happen, and that's what they're doing here. It might not be successful, but that's what they're doing here because they have evidence that she was driving and they believe they have evidence she was drinking. They do have the BAC. I mean, clearly she had alcohol in her blood. I don't think the hospital's wrong on that. It's just when she was drinking. So we're going to have to see. Let's see. I'm sure the warm courtroom and monotonous testimony will help the jurors focus. Yeah, not at all. It will be miserable for them. False Light 24 said, Emily, can a judge directed verdict some of the charges, but not all, i.e. just the DUI, but leave the murder charge? In theory, yes. It's unusual, but yes. What the judge has to find is there's enough evidence for a reasonable jury to go forward and determine the case. So Kyla said, why keep using out-of-date courtrooms that no longer meet the court and human needs rather than modifying and building new courthouses? I don't know how each jurisdiction decides, but law is something built very much on legacy and history, and so maintaining some of that is important. Retrofitting courthouses is important. Sometimes they just knock them down. Other places they don't because they have such historical significance. But retrograding would be helpful, or retroactive or upgrading. Words have stopped, but upgrading to have adequate air conditioning, I imagine, and I am not in the construction industry, but I imagine can be very hard in older buildings to make that work well. So let's see. Boop the Snoop said, my mom never smelled vodka in my fun teenage years. Karen's drink was clear after all. It was, but if she's drinking as much as they think she is, the exhalation of alcohol the day after, we would see some of that. I have seen a lot of comments about this in the chat. Christina said, sorry, off topic, but I just saw the news of Baldwin's reality TV show with his wife and 7 kids. Can this cause issues for court? Not if they're not filming yet. Could they use clips from it? Not if they're not filming yet. Would they be allowed to use courtroom clips? I mean, if he talks about it, we're going to see clips, I imagine, from the Stephanopoulos interview. But I can't imagine they'd be filming. But I will be talking a little bit about Baldwin because a lot is going on in that case in this week's podcast when I record it later today. EDB off topic, what lipstick were you wearing today? I am wearing, there were these new Tarte glosses that caught my attention. The Tarte Juicy Shift, they are color shifting. And I really like the way that they color shift on my face. So these, I was intrigued, and they are nice and soft, and they do not get gunky on my lips. And that's what was on the desk. And I like the color. So, and it stains my lips a little bit. So even when it wears off, I don't feel like I am the palest of the pale human whose face cannot be seen on the screen. So I very much like them. So thank you. Emily, why does it seem that so many DUIs seem to have multiple offenses when they eventually kill someone? How can we keep those people off the roads? Do our laws need to be tougher? DUI laws are tough. This is probably a much longer discussion than we can have at the end of like a 3.5 hour stream, but it is difficult because there are people who get a first offense DUI and never reoffend. And there are those that are habitual offenders. In some states, it takes 3 offenses, in some states more. In some states, there's a period of time of those offenses before it escalates. Sometimes people have never had a DUI in their life and still have a DUI-related crash that kills people. It is incredibly dangerous behavior. I don't know what the balance of the answer is, but it is something that can continue to be discussed. And it's something that there is a lot of advocacy around because it impacts so many. It absolutely impacts quite a lot of lives. I will say, because people ask oftentimes how I feel about weed, and I generally feel it's stupid that it's not just nationally legal, because I've never seen an under the influence collision with somebody under the influence of marijuana. I've seen under the influence collisions for all kinds of illicit substances, but never that one. So I don't know. Alcohol's a tough one. Addiction is a tough one. And the answers are hard. But also, I would hope that the availability of things like Uber and Lyft have reduced some of that. But taxi cabs have been around too. There are areas where getting an Uber from your house, depending on how rural or remote you are, is really difficult. There are areas where there's no public transportation and affording an Uber or Lyft is an issue. Like there's a lot that goes into all of that. And I just don't know the answers. So I don't know. I don't know at all. So I wish I did. Mario, I don't have any Remini Scientology updates yet because this trial has been full. Like full. Mama Wolf said, thank you, Emily. I need the ME testimony. I do too. I'm really frustrated that I don't have it yet. And I'm getting impatient in that frustration. So Kim Moore said, can Trooper Proctor plead the fifth, even as the lead investigator? God, that would be really bad for the prosecution. I don't know. I don't know all of what Trooper Proctor has or has not done. I don't know if it would be proper for Trooper Proctor to plead the fifth. I know from some of the pretrial stuff that he is under investigation and the investigation is under investigation. I don't know what he uniquely has going on to whether or not that would be appropriate, but it goes question by question. In theory, could it happen unless he's offered some type of immunity? Yeah. And if he's offered some type of immunity, we'll talk about that. Well, we're going to talk about immunity a bit in the podcast this week. So we will see. So there's quite a lot there. Music to My Soul said, do you know if they had any motions in limine about the blood evidence? I know that they did have some motions in limine. I don't know what the judge's rulings were in those motions. We're going to go back and look at some of that. Let's see. Salty Beach Girl said, I was born at Prince William Hospital and was a 911 dispatcher during Puppet and DC Sniper. That's a lot. And son goes to William and Mary. Very local. It's locally local. Local. Let's see. Anissa said, I turned into this trial last week. Would a dog attack and slipping on ice be a far-fetched idea? At this point, I don't know. I don't know. I need to know before I weigh in on anything else. I need to know what the coroner says. So, Deb Mueller, I'm sorry, Deb said I saw a .042 on a child welfare investigation awake in the ER. It's so high. Well, if it's a .42, it's so high. If it's a .042, it's not that high. It's under the .08. I'm assuming because you said so high that it was a .42, not a .042. Nope says, is Lally at risk of limiting his own scope of rebuttal? I don't know. Maybe. We're going to have to see what the judge does with that because we're really getting far afield in these witnesses. Sandy said, I feel like if Karen Reed's dad hadn't called for a Section 12, this trial wouldn't even be happening due to no blood alcohol. There would not be a blood alcohol test if she wasn't Section 12, it seemed, but they still charged a hit and run and a second degree murder. So they could have still gone forward on a hit and run causing death. So we'll see. Michelle M said, shouldn't we be screaming Karen Reed is guilty at this point, given the prosecution's case in chief? I mean, you would generally like to have a more clear view of the case. I generally get to the end of the prosecution's case in any given case going, well, what's the defense going to do with that? How are they going to address this? When we got, like the Murdaugh case wasn't clear. Shabusiness and Brooks and others aside, the Murdaugh case I don't think was super clear. So when we get to the end of the prosecution's case on Murdaugh, we've been like, well, we've got a lot of financial crimes, but how do you get around that Snapchat video? What are they going to do about that Snapchat video? And that was the question I was going into the defense case with. What are we going to do with this? Is he going to testify? How's he going to explain it? And he tried to explain, well, I lied to the police because I was worried about this, and that. I don't think it helped him. obviously. I don't think the jury think it helped him because they've talked about it. But by the end of the prosecution's case, you want to understand what their case is. And 6 weeks in, I don't have a clear picture. So, at all. Robbie said, I thought the police called the Section 12. They did not. The police testified that they received a call from Karen Reed's dad and that he was concerned about her based on her statements. We heard, oh, Kelly, I missed this. Sorry. A child with a .042. I read this wrong. Yes, a child should not have a BAC. I read that wrong. I was reading that as a parent. If I misread that, I apologize. Robbie said, I thought the police called. No. The police dispatch was called by the father. The father called the dispatch called the law enforcement on scene. The law enforcement on scene called Carrie Roberts, who had Karen Reed in her vehicle, and said, bring her back to the scene. And then the police issued the Section 12 order, gave it to the paramedics, and the paramedics took Karen Reed back to the hospital. And it seemed that she kind of was just like, I'll go. The statements that were made by the father to the dispatch and the statements Carrie Roberts heard Karen Reed making in the car were very similar. So that's why. Amy Skull said Murdaugh wasn't clear until the Snapchat video. Yeah, the Snapchat video is one of those things when you're like, what are you doing? What are you doing? Let's see. EDB, what is your Starbucks drink? Trying to find one. I mean, you don't have to find one if you don't want to. I prefer the cold brew. I generally don't like their coffees. Their teas, I very much do like their medicine balls and stuff. And I like on the refreshers side, some of their summer refreshers with the popping boba are fun. They are sweet. They are sugary, but they are kind of fun. So Janet said, love the bird feeder cam as well. Well, this is what's on. This is what's on now. I just switched the trial feed over to the bird cam feed from Sapsucker Woods. This is the Cornell bird cam feed. I can't shout it out enough because I absolutely love it. But that is the Cornell Lab feeder watch camera at Sapsucker Woods. The Cornell YouTube channel has a whole bunch of different cameras. I just love this. I love the setup of this camera. I love the variety of birds. I also love that you get the water birds like out on the water out there. And then I really enjoy seeing what other critters they end up with. Last night, a giant raccoon came and plopped himself in the entire like feeder at the bottom there and ate absolutely everything. So just all of it. So I very much enjoy the bird feeder camera as well. Colleen said, EDB, what sentence could Karen Reed face on the charges? I believe the second degree is 15 to life, but I would have to go check. It's a substantial sentence on the second degree, less on the others. So, but it's a substantial sentence on the second degree. It is not insignificant. Christina said, exhibit snafu is all on Bev. I agree. It irks me every time she says it. AJ on day 1 or 2 said, I want to admit defense number, whatever. And Bev said, the number isn't important for me for now. I was shocked, especially after the judge from Depp Heard. Depp Heard was an incredibly well-run courtroom. Everyone worked together really well. They didn't agree. The defense and the plaintiff attorneys didn't agree on a lot of stuff. They fought hard. We saw the sidebars, but they worked really well together to make sure court ran smoothly while they were in front of the jury, and the judge facilitated that. I don't think that this judge is facilitating it as well as Judge A did. So, EDB, do you have their Bird ID app? Oh, yes. Yes, I do. I also have like a Nest app because we had our little nest in the front. The birdies have hatched. I will be sharing that in our members spaces soon, the pictures of the updated. Janice said, I'm applying to Cornell for my master's in legal studies. Thanks to you. Congratulations and good luck. So Haley said Karen Reed isn't in custody. Correct. Karen Reed is not in custody. She is out of custody and has been. She was in custody very briefly, but all the trials make me miss Depp Heard. I mean, there was wildness in Depp Heard, but it ran smoothly in court. The schedule was very clear. The judge was very communicative. The lawyers worked well together to move that case forward in front of the jury. But also remember, in a civil case, that judge put a time limit on them and could stick to it. And there was like there was not just a threat of you need to move it along. There was a hammer at the end of that. Like, no. If you run out of time, I'm cutting you off. You can't do that here. So Paige is asking about the Merlin app. Same. The Merlin app is run by Cornell. So this bird lab. So let's see. Can the jury find her guilty on involuntary manslaughter? I don't know if the judge will give lesser includeds. Involuntary manslaughter is not charged here. I would need to look A, at Massachusetts' involuntary manslaughter statute, and B, because not every jurisdiction has one, and B, I would need to, the attorneys would need to argue it. Not all prosecutors agree to giving lesser includeds. I imagine the defense will ask for lesser includeds, but we are a long way away from that. So it is possible, but we will see. So we watch different cases because I like to see how different lawyers operate. We like to see what's going on in our court system. And I want to know. I was genuinely curious about this case. I remain genuinely curious and now very frustrated that I don't know more. So, Carla said, I feel for the content creators because you can't plan your lives when the schedule is given either day to day or end of the week. I mean, I knew that we were going to be doing this case. So I signed up for it, but we're just rolling with it the best we can. So I chose it. And that's the thing. I get to choose to be here, and I choose to be here because I enjoy being here with y'all and I enjoy covering these cases, but I get to choose it and I think the first person I saw doing coverage of court proceedings on YouTube, because I had watched some like Legal Eagle before that, but I watched mostly other types of content creators, tech, beauty, drama, the rest of it. But I think the first person I came across doing court coverage was Natalie Lawyer Chick. And Natalie Lawyer Chick was breaking down videos from Zoom arraignments and stuff during COVID. And I was like, oh my God, I love seeing her perspective and calling out the prosecutor or the judge or the defense attorney and being like, what are you doing? You're going to land your client in jail. And absolutely enjoyed watching that content quite a lot. And then as we got into covering pop culture cases, as I shifted into just bringing the podcast onto YouTube and then live streaming it and covering pop culture documents, the first trial I was really interested in, like, I want to watch this happen, was Depp v. Heard. There were other trials that other people were covering, and I'm like, I mean, I'm not going to cover it, but I'm interested in what's going on there. But Depp v. Heard was the one that, as it was coming, because we saw that trial coming for years out, right? From the UK verdict, like, we knew that Depp Heard was going to trial. And that's the one that I was like, no, this is within the realm of the pop culture defamation, civil cases, high profile attorneys that I want to see go down, and was going to cover opening, closing, Depp's testimony, Heard's testimony, and figured that everybody would be like, well, I mean, Depo days are kind of boring. We'll circle back. And then when I had to travel for a conference, the law nerds were like, girl, don't leave us alone. And I was like, yeah, I'm invested too. And that's when we decided we're just going day by day. So that's kind of how that grew for me. So have you tried 7 Brew coffee? I don't know. I'm sure there's a 7 Brew around here somewhere. The problem with the ADHD sometimes is when I'm in when we're choosing what food we're doing, that it becomes a routine. And it's real hard to break that food routine sometimes when I'm like, this is what I eat every day. That routine sometimes is really difficult. So yeah, it was really Natalie Lawyer Chick that's like, I'm curious. So with all of that, law nerds, I saw Octo pop into the chat, probably to remind me that I have a meeting. I only popped into other people's streams during Rittenhouse. I did not cover it here. I had received invitations to pop into streams during Rittenhouse, but I very quickly found that it was very difficult for me to pop into streams with a lot of people because A, I have a lot of trial experience and I want to say things, and B, my neurodivergency doesn't play well with large groups of people that are not neurodivergent, because it's like, girl, you're interrupting. I'm like, I literally can't. And I couldn't pause when I needed to. Large groups do not work well for my neurodivergence. So it was a challenge for me. I also have quite a lot of trial experience. So I wanted to be able to share that with y'all in a way that worked best for me. So sometimes we learn by trying things out and go, oh no, nope. I just need to be, I am a better streamer by myself, I think, because I've got the law nerds and you guys get it. So it's hard. I saw Lori in the chat ask, do you regret it? No, not at all. Cause I learned what worked best for me as a streamer. And I think we learn through trying things, and sometimes we learn through errors. We're humans. So we have to try things out, and then we learn that what works well for us and what doesn't work well for us. So I just learned what worked well for me and what didn't work well for me, because I love having conversations with other attorneys, but I realized that that's maybe not best for me to stream, and that's not the best suited for that situation. And that's why I enjoy streaming like after a trial day with Rob and Ian or Natalie Lawyer Chick and Alita and others and Hogue, and having those conversations later. I think that works better for me as a content creator, to have those conversations after the fact. So that is really what I learned. So the idea to look at live court for me came from Natalie Lawyer Chick, because she was crushing the Zoom courts during COVID, and she's the first one I saw doing it, and I loved the way she was doing it. So that, as we shifted, but the reason I started streaming was because Octo was like, girl, why aren't we just streaming? I told that story a little bit at CrimeCon. I'll talk about it on our members only live when we talk about CrimeCon. But right now I've got a meeting, and then I'm going to record the podcast. So members in the members spaces, you will get a notification to go check your members spaces in the app. The members in the app, you will get a link in the app. The members on YouTube, you will get a link here on YouTube. And I will be recording the podcast with you. And then I'm going to later today try to go work out. So I'm going to have to zoom because otherwise I'm not going to take care of myself. LEG said, I love Natalie so much. It's unreal. I do too. I love her humor. She's got just a ton of trial experience, and I just think she's incredible. So I enjoy her coverage. I also see the frustration for her of wanting to stream more, but also needing to be in court. Her clients must just adore her so much and feel very supported by such a great attorney. So I'm in a not fangirl anymore over the others in my space whose content I really enjoy. And I will see you guys tomorrow for a full day of court. Members, I will see you later for a recording of the podcast. If you're a new member on YouTube, that'll pop up. So I will see you guys soon. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being the Law Nerd. You can stay up to date with everything I'm covering and fast notifications on our free iOS and Android app at lawnerdapp.com, or search the App Store for Law Nerd. You can also follow me around social media, and don't forget to check out my podcast, The Emily Show, with quick bits dropping every Monday, summarizing everything I do here on the live streams on Tuesday and Thursday, for when you just have time for the quick bits. Thanks for being a Law Nerd.